All right. Well, welcome to the Transform Spokane show. This is something that's been in our spirit for about 5 years, and we're excited to finally launch this. We've had a couple of studios that we built, and the Lord just said it wasn't time. And so now we feel like He's said, green light, go for it. And He's given us an amazing studio, so we're so excited to be able to do that. Yeah. The reason why the Transform Spokane show exists is very simple. I am tired of hearing all bad things in the media. Every time I get on my phone, every time I watch the TV or watch the news, it's always reflective of everything bad that's happened in the Spokane and northern Idaho region. And I don't see that all the time because of the ministry God's allowed me to be a part of. I see God moving all the time in lots of churches and in lots of nonprofits and on the street. And I was like, you know what? Let's start sharing these stories and let's talk about transforming Spokane. And so that's what this show is going to be about. I'm going to be working diligently to bring on people that are leaders in our community that are seeing moves of God and just share what God's doing so that we can get that into our spirit. So that's what this show's about. And our first guest is a good friend of the ministry. Her name's Sula, and I'm going to read her bio, and then we're going to jump right into your story.
All right.
For those that don't know, we also run an anti-trafficking organization. So first guest that we have is an amazing survivor of that, and she's willing to tell her story with you. And she's also an amazing writer and gifted at taking complex things and making them very simple for people to understand. So the second half of this podcast, I'm going to go through her book. And then we also have Anya, our Chief Program Officer. She runs everything that's related to the anti-trafficking side of what we do. And I'm going to ask you guys some questions and go through the book after you tell your story. So you go with that?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So Sula's passion for helping others comes from overcoming a very painful past. She has found freedom and healing from the traumas of her life and has been radically transformed through becoming a fiery believer and a follower of Jesus Christ. Her life exudes joy and peace, which is present in all that she does as an author, minister, and abolitionist. As a survivor of sex trafficking, she works to spread awareness, teach prevention, and equip nonprofits and service providers in the anti-trafficking movement through training and consulting. With a wealth of experience, she has aided countless survivors of exploitation and occult ritual abuse and escape, healing, and transition to a renewed life. It's her joy to advance the kingdom of God with the love and power of the gospel. She ministers in faith to see Jesus miraculously heal many. She is an accomplished author of 5 books, with many more on the way. And you have a very interesting story. So, but it's not as uncommon as people would assume. And I would love for you to get into that. I'd love for you to be able to share that with us. But before that, I want you guys to understand how near and dear this is to me, because the first 2 individuals that were in my life that were trafficked also came out of satanic ritual abuse.
Yeah.
And so this was something that is really near and dear to my heart, and an area that I have always wanted to learn more about, wanted to learn how to bring healing, because both of these people that were friends of mine grew up in families that were actually into the occult. And so they were ritually abused from a very young age, and never could fully explain or talk. You always got a feeling like they couldn't fully talk about everything they'd gone through because you just didn't understand. You know what I mean? And so they were polite, but you could tell, like, I don't fully understand what you've been through, and they wouldn't want to scare me or kind of like get too into the weeds with it, because I just didn't get it, you know? Yeah. And so to be able to finally get your book and to be able to have somebody that we can talk to and learn from has been such a blessing. And so I want to thank you for that. But so who were you in junior high? Like, if I was to meet Sula's best friend and said, who's Sula?
Yeah.
Who would they say you were in junior high?
Well, first, I just want to say thank you really quick for having me on the podcast, for allowing me to partner with your ministry and just be a friend to you guys and walk alongside you guys. It's been such an honor. And this is a big deal, being here today. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Who was I in junior high? I was a hot mess. Let's just start there. I was a hot mess. In junior high, I was being exploited. I was on drugs. I was struggling with mental health. But I was also doing really well in school. So my teachers didn't know that I had ecstasy, acid in my backpack, vodka in my water bottle. My parents didn't really know what was going on with me because I would always just come home and stay in my room if I wasn't sneaking out at night because my pimp boyfriend was forcing me to. That's just a quick little
And that's in junior
snapshot.
high.
Yeah,
Right.
So
maybe we back up and go, how did we end up there?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, life started out for me with a lot of trauma. When I was first, right out the gate, my mom was a single mom who was working really hard to provide for me. And this meant that she needed to have babysitters watching me and while she was working and going to school. And unfortunately, one of these families, this babysitter that watched me pretty consistently from 18 months to 3 years old, they were also occult traffickers. So really charming, nice, but my first memories in life were being, as a baby, as a toddler, being moved from different mattresses on the floor and different people coming in and abusing me. I remember being shoved under comforters, being forced to do things with big body parts. And I remember trying to hide when I knew it was going to happen again. But I really only had one closet I could hide in, so they would always find me. And my mom actually found out that this horrific nightmare was happening to her baby when, at 3 years old, I asked her to give me oral sex. And she was just like, what? She just had no idea.
Like, how do you know anything about this? Yeah.
Because a toddler should not know anything about sex. Or any sexual activity. So she did launch an investigation. She did report it. And then got me into counseling, or got me into therapy. And in Berkeley at the time, she had no idea that the counselor that she was bringing me to was also what's known as a programmer. So she started doing different hypnosis types of, therapy with me. And this involved identifying that I already had fractured parts. So meaning the trauma that I went through as a baby and as a toddler was so intense, it was just too hard to live through. So my mind, my soul split off and fractured into different personalities so that I could keep living. So when she was, these therapy sessions, she would ask me about what had happened to me. And I would turn and talk to another part of myself and ask her, because it didn't happen to me, it happened to her.
And you're just a toddler.
I was 3, yeah.
Wow.
So it's one of the ways that people can actually survive horrific traumatic events, evil, abuse, is to split or fracture into different personalities, different parts.
Do you think that's something that the Lord just provides as an escape for people that are going through such horrendous things?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Now, you talk to mental health professionals, the average one, or you talk to people that know about diagnoses like DID, dissociative identity disorder, and I know we'll probably get into that a little bit later. We have Anya, who's a clinical counselor, licensed counselor here today. But when you mention that stuff, the average thought is kind of like, oh, that person's kind of crazy,
Yeah.
But I really do think it's the brilliance of God that he created the mind and the soul to be able to compartmentalize events that were too evil, too traumatic, too horrendous for a person to survive, because the only other option is death.
Yeah.
The only other option is, this is so overwhelming, I can't survive it, so I'm going to die in this. So instead, there's a compartmentalization of the horrific situation, and you can keep living and keep going through life. And then later in life, God is also the same God that created the soul and the mind to be able to do that, is the answer and the solution to be able to heal and mend and bring it all back together.
Yeah.
Wow. So you've got, that's so incredible. So you would say almost even at the age of 3 is when you started having what I would say multiple personality disorder.
Yes. Well, it could have been before then, like when it started. It could have started at 18 months. I actually don't know exactly when it started.
Okay.
But occult ritual abuse involving spiritual, like demons, rituals, and things like that, with being sold and exploited to adults, that combination of spiritual and physical evil happening to your body, to your spirit, to your soul, there's no way I could have survived without dissociating. So in hindsight, I am thankful for dissociation.
Yeah.
I think it's why I'm alive, aside from the grace of God, because I couldn't have survived that. So that just marked the beginning of my life. I think it marked me spiritually as well, because trauma just kept happening. It was almost like anybody that was yielded to evil and a pedophile and an abuser, a rapist, a trafficker, it almost was like they could see me and see that I was an easy target. Like I became targeted. And so it just kept happening. Like
I've heard that from so many people that get abused as a child. They say it's like they feel like there's a sign above their head or something that says, please come abuse me.
And I actually think in the spirit realm there is. Like in the spirit realm there's something that happens when severe trauma goes on, because Satan loves to capitalize off of trauma. He sees that as a great opportunity to continue to build strongholds and do evil and things of that nature, because that person is now vulnerable and open for spiritual activity. The trauma is an open door, essentially, to where, and it doesn't mean that everyone that experiences trauma also experiences like satanic, warfare, but it just means that person becomes more vulnerable or susceptible to it. Sure. So it just continued to happen. I mean, I had sexual abuse happen throughout my childhood. I had experienced rapes. I had experienced just continued abuse. And by 14, I end up in a relationship with a pimp.
Right.
And at that time, I had actually already had my first abortion. My first real boyfriend actually ended up getting me pregnant, but I was too traumatized by sexual abuse prior that I froze. I was in the freeze trauma response. I couldn't move. My body could not move to stop him, and I ended up pregnant. So now we've got complex trauma. We've got a compiling of various types of trauma that continue to be added on. And age 14, now I'm in a relationship with this pimp that is selling me all these dreams, and he's like drives a nice car, and he was really handsome, and he was just talking all the right talk, and then also holding guns to my head, and also choking me, and also grooming me and teaching me all about how to be a good victim of exploitation.
Yeah, how to be in life.
Or prostitute, but victim.
Yeah.
And so moving forward, more trauma is going on, and he ends up moving away to Vegas, him and all of his pimp friends, and I'm still in school, so I obviously couldn't just leave. And age 17, now a female pimp comes along, and I think it's important to know that pimps are like, I don't think it's fair to say that there's like a stereotype of what a pimp looks like.
No.
Because it could be parents.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
It could be presenting Christian parents who are actually selling and exploiting their child in a satanic network.
That was both of my friends' experience.
Case in point.
Yeah.
So you can't it's not the big guy that looks like the pimp of the early 90s and 80s with the big chains, and it looks like this big stereotypical, wearing the bright suits and the big hats and the big alligator shoes. It's like, it's not, we've got to it's not the boogeyman, it's like, it can look like anybody. So yeah, at 17, a female pimp. I had a female pimp trafficker, and I think at that point it was really easy to, once you're exploited and once you have been essentially like programmed into sex trafficking of certain things, like, okay, you learn what the universal laws of trafficking, and if you violate them, the consequences that happen. And so for her to come along, I think it was probably really easy for her to traffic me because I had already experienced that stuff. I had already been groomed. I'd already, went through so much. And so she coerced and tricked and manipulated and lied to me and was selling me in the strip clubs in San Francisco, which, of course, at 17 as a minor, you're not supposed to be allowed to strip in the strip clubs. And
did you have to get a fake ID and all that?
No, she just talked to the club owners.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I ended up being sold into hotels. She would bring me to different hotels for different tricks or clients, buyers.
Do you mind if I pause right here?
Yeah, sure.
So we have a lot of young people that will listen to the show a little bit because I love kids. I love youth ministry and young adult ministry. And I feel like for me personally, sex trafficking kind of starts in the junior high hallway. Now, for you, it started much earlier, but it's almost like as soon as you hit junior high, it's like culture's screaming at you. The most important thing about you is your body and what you can give a man sexually. And to a young guy, it's like everything's trying to get you addicted to porn and everything's trying to get you to start looking at women as objects, and you become popular based on your body count and how many women you can hook up with. And so you've got all these young people going. So I'm wondering, did that have a part to play with you meeting this trafficker and this pimp at 14 years old? How did you meet him? Or was it through the satanic abuse of your childhood that you ended up getting introduced to him? Like, how do you meet this guy?
Yeah.
And what would you tell maybe young people listening to it? Like, what would you tell yourself at that age now, like in hindsight, looking back at that?
Yeah. So... great questions. At age 14, so he wasn't like a Satanist or he wasn't in the occult. He was like the standard pimp, like intimate partner, trafficking relationship. So he just saw a young, pretty girl and found out I was easy to manipulate.
So he found you out. He looked you out.
Oh, yeah. It was just like the dude that's hollering at the girl, like, hey, you should come talk to me. Like, you should be with me, da-da-da-da. It was just, that's kind of how it started. So for young people, I want to say, like, you're so right. The culture now is so overly sexualized. Everything that we see in the entertainment industry and, in movies and TV shows, it's like sex is so overly, like, if you're not doing this, something's wrong with you.
Yeah.
And sexting is now part of normal culture, meaning if you're in a relationship with a dude, they're going to ask you for send me nudes. And if you're not doing that, then, it's an issue. And I want to say, what I would say to any young people watching, if a guy is asking you to send nudes, if a guy is asking you to do anything with your body that you're not comfortable with, and they don't respect your boundaries, kick rocks, get out. Just tell them, like, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not that girl, or I'm not that guy. I'm not interested. Because if there's no respect for boundaries, for physical boundaries, then they're not going to continue to. They're going to keep pushing you. And once they get pictures, usually those pictures get shared with the football team.
Yeah.
They get shared with, oh, look at what, or if you guys break up, 100% they're getting shared once you break up. And likely it's not going to, whatever promises they're feeding you, it's not going to last more than a month or
you're just sitting there with your boy and you're asking for the pictures and you're hey, check this out as they're coming in.
Which is a form of exploitation too.
Yeah.
So often it starts out with pictures being shared in a relationship or online. Someone will start harassing online and get in the DMs and they'll say, oh, I know stuff about you, whatever. Or they'll build trust. They'll start grooming and build trust, and then they'll get a picture. And then once they get the picture, it's like, I'm going to share this with your whole school and with your parents if you don't start sending me videos. And so that's where I see like the easiest way for young people to be exploited now is to start out with getting something that they can use to blackmail them to continue doing more. And then sometimes it'll progress to in person actually being sold physically.
Do you think, so between 14 and 17, I'm kind of curious about this. Do you think because you had been exploited and you basically at this point, it's almost like your identity's being told to you, this is the most important part of you. This is how you make money. This is how you get attention. Do you think it was easier maybe for that woman to come into your life and exploit you because at this point she can come in and say, hey, listen, woman empowerment, I can if this is just going to happen to you, at least I can teach you how to be in control of it or how to make money off of it. And so do you think that played a part at all? Like, it's just interesting to me that, because with a guy, it's a little bit, they can use the Romeo effect. Hey, I love you. I want to be with you. You're just helping me out. With her, I'm like, how would a woman come in and exploit that unless you're already kind of like, hey, I'm already in this life, like.
I think for me, it was more so like the mental illness. So I had fractured parts, meaning I had different realities that I was living from. And so when someone came in speaking the same language, it was almost like that part of me that had already been trafficked, that had already been sold, that had already experienced abuse would switch in. And it was almost like there is I have to do this or else, because I know what happens when I don't comply. There's torture. There's more abuse in the spirit realm at night. I'm getting pulled out of my body and raped by demons and being pulled to demonic altars and all kinds of crazy spiritual stuff. I'm having witches and occult members coming into my room and choking me and hurting me. So this is my normal. So it's like there's this stuff happening in the natural, but there's also all of hell breaking loose the moment I lay in my bed and start closing my eyes. And so when someone came along with the same vocabulary, it was almost like, all right, I'm switching to that part. And you get to a point where it's like, if you get tortured every time you don't do something, you learn that the easiest way to survive is just to I don't feel like I have a choice. So I was a mind-controlled person. So I think it was easy for her to come in and get me to a false sense of comply with her because I had already been controlled, manipulated. All of the work of breaking me had been done already. So she could just come along and speak the same language and the same words. And I was just like, I didn't really feel like I had a choice, even though I did. I didn't know that.
Right.
So it was more so that way that the mental health and the condition of my soul was already so broken and I already didn't have a sense of value.
Got it.
So, and then after that, it was like I was able to, things started getting more and more with the hotel, like bringing me to hotels and stuff. And I got out of all that. And after that, my body I was so I got to a point where then I realized I had this mindset, which I think a lot of people in the sex industry, just like strippers, can have. I had this mindset of well, it's actually the tricks and the buyers that are stupid. They're going to pay to see my naked body. They're dumb. Every female has a naked body. Anybody, they could see a naked body anywhere, but they're paying me for it. So it was more and that is a mindset that she implemented. Girls that are just having sex with guys are hoes. You're smart. You're getting money for it. Wow. Even though I wasn't keeping the money all went to her. Oh,
okay. So she literally was taking all the money.
Yeah, she was pimping me out.
It wasn't, hey, let's do this. At least you're going to make some money. And so it wasn't even the money
not $1
that you were making that she was utilizing to get you into the game.
I was already easy to control. But once I got away from that, my takeaway from what she did with me was my body. Who cares if someone wants to pay to see my body? Now, not physically. I'd never self-exploited myself in giving my body sexually to someone because I was terrified of that. I actually didn't like sex at all because of the trauma that I had been through, in that phase of life. So, but as far as stripping and dancing, I came to a point where I didn't have anywhere to go. And I was like, well, I saw piles of cash. I didn't get to keep any of it, but I saw piles of cash. I know how to make it. And who cares at this point? And so I had zero value for my body. So I did actually for 6 months, I started stripping and And it was just this mindset of like, yeah, I'm the one, like the women empowerment thing. That's when that kicked in for me.
Okay.
Like, these buyers are so stupid. They're giving money, they're throwing money, and they're just seeing me. They don't even get to like do anything with me. So that just felt like, but then that ended in a suicide attempt. So I realized I should probably get out of that because things just got really crazy and I didn't want to live anymore. So I was in a suicide attempt, and I actually had an encounter with the Lord. God came into my drunken stripper suicide attempt.
Do you mind like telling us about it?
Yeah. I just felt like this cycle just continues. There's no way out of it but death. And I just couldn't take it anymore. I actually had bought a brand new butcher knife from IKEA, butcher knife set from IKEA, so it was brand new knives. And I was just sitting on the floor, just slicing, and blood everywhere. And I actually had a vision, and like God came into that suicide attempt. And I saw this vision of like all of these broken, like dirty people, sick, wounded, abused people. And it was like this huge crowd, and they were all staring at me. All of them were staring at me. And it was like, they were just like swaying. It was like this eerie look. And God said to me, you can't end your life now, because who's going to reach the ones that I created you to reach? And in that moment, I realized, oh my gosh, my life is about more than me. And that.
How old are you at this point? 20?
No, I was 18.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So I had an encounter with God. So that's a holy, amazing God.
You'd lived like 3 lives in.
Oh, more than that. I've lived so many lives. Yeah. Well, literally, I was living many lives. I was a fractured person, and every part of me kind of had their own life. So, little DID humor. Come on, guys, lighten up. You know, I know this is heavy stuff, but
walked into that one. Oh man. So is that where, when you have that first encounter with the Lord, is that where everything changes for you?
Not yet. Not yet. So it was like I had met Jesus in the Word like got saved at 16, but it was in a legalistic church. So a church where they said you have to dress a certain way, you have to do all of this stuff to earn being holy. So I felt like I know this is truth, but I don't feel like I could ever be close enough to really experience it.
So you felt like you knew the Bible was truth.
Yeah.
But you were like, I don't know how to.
I felt
be
very
this perfect
far.
Human being like they are.
Yeah.
So, okay.
And that was what was projected. Like, you basically perfection is holiness. And so I was still so messed up and so traumatized, and there was no power to actually help set me free in that church. So I was still like, so come back to the suicide attempt. That was probably one of my first really powerful encounters with the God of love.
Huh.
And I didn't know him to be that way prior, like that he was really love. And that, he wasn't intimidated that I was a stripper. He wasn't intimidated that I was drunk and high out of my mind. He wasn't even intimidated that I was in the middle of a suicide attempt. He came into the middle of that and saw me. And so, but I still didn't have the understanding of like really who he was.
Okay.
Because that was twisted and perverted by people who made him to be something that he wasn't to me.
Yeah, and a lot of times in the satanic ritual abuse, they'll actually do that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
What do you, just pausing on that, for youth pastors?
Yeah.
How important is it for them to be trained in this? Because you're being abused and trafficked at 14. You show up to a church at 16 years old. And if it wasn't for that even understanding maybe of who Christ was, then maybe at 18 you don't really fully understand. So how important would it have been for a youth pastor to be trained in this? And could they have maybe helped you if they understood what signs to look for? Because
it could have
I'm assuming
everything.
They probably didn't.
Yeah, no, my youth pastor at the time told people I had a Jezebel spirit, which I probably did, but it came back to me that my youth pastor, was saying that about me.
But can we even just pause there about let's just look at, paint this picture. You were 16. You were an addict, a troubled child. coming into a youth group with multiple personalities
And demons.
right?
Yeah.
Right? And the response of a pastor
Was
is
you
a
have Jezebel
shaming.
spirit. Yeah.
You have a Jezebel spirit. Like, I think it's so important for us to just pause for a second and realize, like, maybe we should actually ask ourselves why a 16-year-old would have a Jezebel spirit.
Yeah, you're not saying you don't have one, so maybe
Right, that's what
they're
I'm saying, like-
understanding you might have one, but
Yeah.
how we communicate that and how we deal with that.
Right. Like, where's
Yeah.
this, where's the heart? Why are we victimizing that? Like,
Yeah.
even if we look at that and we go, okay, it's still a demon. It's not her.
Right.
Like, it's separate from her. It would be like, and yet we're shaming her. We're looking at that person or, and saying as if that demon is their identity.
Say that. Yeah.
And it's like, no, we need to come in with a heart of love that the Lord has and go, that's a demon who has taken over. And let's ask ourselves why it's even had the availability to come in.
I'm so glad you said that.
Right?
Because there was
it's
a big missed opportunity there. My whole life could have changed
huge.
at that moment.
And yet most youth pastors are going to go, oh, we don't want that in our youth group. That can't spread.
Right.
Well, I
Right?
remember,
That's promiscuous.
Yeah.
We have an addict. We have
That was the mindset.
Instead of what has this sweet girl been through?
yeah.
And let's help her with the demon that we're discerning.
Right, exactly. And like, let's actually
Yeah.
educate
Yeah.
and get some help.
Yeah.
Even if, and I think this is even a huger, even if we don't know how to do that, like even if the Lord's given you the ability to discern it, but you don't yet feel you have the power to walk in to get rid of it, then help them find someone
that
who
understands.
does.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, because my whole life the whole trajectory of my life could have changed. And I wouldn't have experienced sex trafficking, let's see, after that 1, 2, 3, like 3 more times. And all,
But
like
how
my
many years
whole
for
life
that?
could have changed at age 16 when I
Yep.
met Jesus. Because ultimately later it was Jesus that did deliver me of every demon, heal and restore my broken, fractured soul with personalities and parts. Like,
Right. And it was another,
completely
what,
set me
8 years?
free. It was, yeah, too long. So, I mean, it could have at that point, if the youth pastors understood.
Yep.
And then not only, I want to say this too, that often the gift of discernment, Satan tempts people with great discernment with judgment. So they will discern something and be tempted to judge the person with what
Yeah.
they, so instead of that youth pastor discerning that there were spirits and there were things in my life and meeting that with love and compassion like Jesus would have, right?
Yeah.
We saw Jesus do many times.
Yep.
He was tempted to judge, oh, she has that, instead of moving in the power of the kingdom to heal the sick, cleanse those with leprosy, cast out demons, right? Like, instead of doing the work of the ministry and really being Christ-like to me, that was the response. And so it just further made me feel more shame, more isolated.
Yeah.
It made me walk away with, I know this is true, but that God doesn't really want me.
Right.
He sees me as dirty, broken.
Right. Because that
demons.
pastor represented God to
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. So,
Yeah. And even though his heart might have been in a place of how he was trained and how
Yeah.
he was looking at it and trying to maybe be a shepherd and protect the rest of the kids, we just need to be able to do better at training the church.
Well, you can do
Yeah.
both and.
yeah.
No,
You don't have to
100%.
do one or the
Yeah.
other. And I think
Yeah.
that's the part is you don't
Yeah.
have to choose.
Yeah.
You don't have to choose between helping the one and protecting the flock. Like you can do both and.
Yeah, we need to, I'm excited about that and learning. We have to get better at that.
Yeah.
Because there's been, even in my own life, there's been a few moves of God that have happened even when I was in a junior high where all my friends got saved. And then they would shut that down because what would happen is so many street kids and so many non-church kids would show up to these centers, and when they get saved, then the church, the families in the church would say, hey, we don't want our kids to be a part of this because they're getting massively influenced by the kids that are coming in here that don't have the
Fear.
healthy families.
And that's it. That's it. You have to go, what are they operate? What's
Yeah.
behind that
Yeah.
response? Because that's not the heart of Jesus.
I've got a
Yeah.
couple friends that never went to church. There's a really awesome youth center when I was in junior high, and the only time they ever heard about Jesus was at that youth center. And then basically what I was told is the youth center shut down because the ones in the youth group that were like the traditional youth group kids, families were like, we don't know how to handle this, but there was hundreds of kids coming.
But like when you understand the kingdom of God, the kingdom of heaven, it is a culture. Where we can impact those. They can, so it's like a different mindset. It's like we live from righteousness, peace, and joy in the Holy Spirit. We live from power, a place of power. And so no matter who's coming in, when Jesus laid hands on the sick, he didn't get sick. When Jesus cast out demons, the demons didn't jump inside of him. It's a completely different, but when you have fear, it's like, I'm afraid that what Satan is doing is going to like,
but if we look
plan is better than.
But if we look at what does the word said, it says perfect love casts out all fear. So where fear is abounding, love is absent.
And I think that's good.
So good.
I think the other thing I want to pause on real quick. So people that are watching may or may not know that there was a strip club that was in our city that shut down. And we at the time were looking for a facility that would be able to be open late, be on a bus line, be a secure building, and a location that maybe the people in our clients might know where it's at. And so for us, this looked like a perfect building for us to do this. And the first night that we got the building, and I remember sitting there like going, God, what do you want me to do? Because there's two ways to do this. There's that evangelism way, which is, hey, let's invite everybody that used to work here, give them dinner, feed them, love on them, and let them. I'm going to rechange my wording on that, but as I'm learning, but just genuinely share the love of Christ with them, and then let them know what we're about to do, right? And then there was the other side of me that is hearing all the stories of women that are being trafficked, being abused. Most every woman that we've ever worked with that's been a traffic victim at some point has stripped. So I'm hearing all the stories from that. So my lens is looking through this lens, and I'm going, I want to make a statement, and I'm sick and tired of men in my community basically having a building, we would call it our gentleman's club, where we would basically just exploit women. And so the first night we get the club, we remove the stages, and I invite any man in the community that just wants to come dedicate the building to God, and about 300 of them show up. And
amazing.
They decide, hey, we're going to dedicate this building to the Lord. And here's the part that I was frustrated with, though, is because of that, the media showed up. And when the media showed up, we had a pastor lined up to preach a whole message, which he did. We tried our best to not. It was an internal kind of removing of the stages and stuff because we didn't want to hurt any of the women that might think we're bashing them. We're really we just need to remove the stages, and it's a prophetic act. And so we didn't let anybody film that. And we had some women that showed up to protest, which I thought was very brave of them. First of all, they don't know. They show up, there's 300 guys, there's a bunch of bikers, and they still have the bravery to say, here's where we're at. They just wanted to let us know that some of them chose this and they weren't trafficked. Right?
Which is a really good thing to know, that every stripper is not a sex trafficking victim.
Right.
There are some people that choose it.
They wanted us to know that. And it was valid. And the beginning of the night, we had another pastor get up just to open the night in prayer. And one of the things he did was he prayed over the building. He said, any spirit of Jezebel or any spirit of Delilah, we cast you out. It was part of his longer prayer, but there's just these two lines where he says this. I'm not thinking much about it. I don't think anybody was. We were just like, hey, we're dedicating the building of the Lord. First thing we got to do is clean house. And then the next pastor gets up, preaches. I got friends that got saved in there, some of them that were sold drugs back in the day.
Such a powerful event.
And one of them specifically decided, hey, after that event, like, I need to give my life to the Lord, and I need to marry my girlfriend, and the whole deal, and let me do their wedding. So it was quite an awesome thing. But the next morning I wake up, and all the media printed was what that first pastor said, where we cast Jezebel and Delilah Delilah out. And that was...
They publicized the judgment lens.
Angry because now these women that we thought we had built a friendship with and we were like honored, they even brought gifts for the trafficking victims that we work with. Like, it made me cry. And I'm not a very like emotional person. It made me tear up. Like, it was very humbling. And so I was so excited. And then we wake up in the morning and it makes it look like the church is calling the girls that work there Jezebels and Delilahs, and we're casting them out. And I was just really upset about that and angry by that because unfortunately, that is some of these young girls' real encounters with the church. And that was not the heart of us. That wasn't the heart of the 300 men there. It wasn't the heart of the pastors there. And so I would love to, like, to bring that back to what you experienced. Just even messaging and how we do this and how we share is so important. And because even the media just twisting that, it really didn't help that relationship at all, right? Because these women are thinking, hey, we came, we brought gifts, we came in a spirit of love, and they betrayed us. You know?
And that's one thing I want to say is that every time that there's a man of God that truly reflects the character of Jesus or the love of the Father, it's redeeming to someone like me. Like, even still now, you know, my last sex trafficking experience was 20 years ago. Like, whenever I meet somebody that's standing for God and is making a decision to help women like you, like this ministry, like the men that gathered that did it in love because we love the women that are vulnerable and broken in our city, we're doing this for them. Like, there's something so redeeming because we've been exploited, we've been abused, we've been hurt by so many men and also by people in the church. There's a lot of church hurt that comes when you've lived the life that I've lived.
Pastors and leaders and
with the judgment.
Going to the club. Like, that's one of the biggest things I've heard. It's
having to service them.
We can hear stories like crazy of telling us stories of pastors from our community in the club.
That tracks. That makes sense. I've heard, experienced, seen the same with others. But like, that's why I think it's so important for men like you and the men of this ministry that stand up for the true love of God, the true character of Christ. We need more men to be Christ-like. Like, Christ-like men actually bring healing and redemption for people like me who have experienced the opposite. So, and I'm hoping that the narrative of that story in the media gets changed, and that specifically those ones that were wounded by what was said through the media, that there's a moment of redemption.
Well, and that's one of the reasons why we did the show, because I was praying about it, and I'm going, God, there's so much agenda with the media on both sides. It doesn't matter. I could be having a conversation with someone for an hour and say, this is what I want out. This is our heart. And they don't care. They wait for that one thing that they can kind of take into their bias for the story. And I realized, I'm like, even Jesus had Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John write down what was going on, which would be like the modern day blogging, right? Like, he had his own media team, and in a way, and I thought, you know what? If we didn't have that, the only story we would know of Jesus is from the Jewish perspective or from the Roman perspective. We wouldn't actually understand the real heart of Jesus if he wasn't wise enough to have them document that or to have them write those stories. And so that's when I realized, I'm like, we need to just have our own media to be able to really bring in some of the people, get the truth out, and bring in, my friend that was the manager of the club, and so we can really have discussion and conversation, and people can really understand our heart, and that. So that was one of the reasons we wanted to do this.
It's amazing.
But I want to get back. So we stopped at 18. It was just everything you said just sparked so much thought, and I wanted to kind of pause on that. But so you're 18 years old. You have this encounter. You tried committing suicide. Jesus shows up in the midst of this. He's not intimidated by it at all. He still loves you, shows you who he really is.
And wasn't judging me.
And wasn't judging you.
Yeah.
But you weren't quite ready to fully submit your life to him yet.
Yeah, I was still dealing with so much. So I didn't have like community and a support system to really help me understand fully the Word of God and like walk alongside me. I didn't have a safe home. I didn't have a helping captives, which is, I'm so thankful that you guys are doing what you're doing and that you guys are specializing in helping people like me. Because there's very few safe homes and organizations in this nation that really are doing this work, and it's vital because I was still out there trying to figure it out on my own. So I ended up being exploited again by age 20. I was in the modeling, acting space, and for me, I'm like leading my own life, so I'm thinking maybe this is how I'm going to help people. Maybe this is how I'm going to see all those people in that vision and like, you know, bring like help people in the world and stuff like that, because it'll give me the ability to do that. And me and my little naive, still broken self, and I end up going on a modeling job, and I get sold to another country. I was purchased by a billionaire designer. I didn't know I was purchased. I had a one-way ticket. I thought I was going to be doing a modeling job for a clothing line that was well-known in stores nationwide, and ended up that I was delivered into his bedroom in this paradise location in another country, and I had no idea that he bought me for himself as a sex slave. I thought I was going on a modeling job. So this stuff happens a lot in the entertainment industry. We're starting to see a lot more coming out about this in the news now, thankfully. I'm so glad that people that used to be untouchable are, that justice is starting to happen. But anyways, you know, it's like here it was again. It happened again. And there were girls that were coming and going all the time. And he would just pick who he wanted every night and rape, abuse, torture. Now, he was Satanist as well.
Wow.
So, anyway, and so I one time asked if I could get a ticket home because I noticed that girls were actually leaving. Like they weren't staying there the whole time. Like I had to stay there. And there was a security checkpoint. So it wasn't like I could just grab my bags and run. And then I didn't have any money to get home. I didn't know, like... and so anyways, I asked him if I could get a ticket home, and he said, no, I bought you as a Christmas gift for my girlfriend. And he pointed to a picture on the wall, and he said, see that picture? Yeah, she wanted you. So he purchased me like an item, like an object for her. And then we were taken a few places. And after, it was like I had to fulfill what he bought me for. And then I was able to form a trauma bond really with her. And I asked her if I could get a ticket home and I would stay with her if she could help me get back. And she asked him, and then I was able to get a ticket home, only to continue being exploited to the elite in Hollywood, in the entertainment industry.
So you stayed with that modeling agency that sold you. When you got back, you kept doing it and they kept exploiting you?
I'm not going to answer that question fully.
Okay.
But yeah, there's a lot of things going on. But I continued to be trafficked and exploited in Hollywood.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would just find myself in mansions being raped when I thought I was going for a job or having, networking dinner or something like that.
Is that something that, I mean, we're hearing about it, but that's something that is that pretty prevalent in the industry and in Hollywood?
Yes. Yeah.
So it's
not only
just
sex
rumors.
trafficking, but we're seeing satanic ritual abuse stuff coming out too.
Yeah.
I mean, we're seeing it in music videos. We're seeing concerts that are rituals.
It's becoming very blatant.
Like they're literally doing rituals with the people that attend to concerts. And so, now it's just kind of like out there, like,
Yeah, they're not even
Pretty
hiding.
crazy.
They're not even hiding it, yeah. So, both sex trafficking and satanic ritual abuse are very prevalent in the Hollywood scene and the entertainment industry. I was even like looking at, like the Netflix top 10 movies. that shows up, like, what are people actually watching in our country? I was looking at that recently, and it was like a title. I'm not even going to say the title because I don't want people to look up. But it was like some of the top 10 movies are about the occult. Like, in our country, people are fascinated about this topic. And so we've got to...
And I wonder if they're fascinated more because they're searching for the spiritual, the power, the connection, just so much of what people are feeling is missing, or that they know is being like, they know it's out there, and they know people are walking in this, so they're going, how do I get some of that? And they don't know the answer to that, so they're looking and trying to find where that answer is.
And if they're trying to go to a church that doesn't talk about the spirit realm or the kingdom of God,
we got lots of churches that lack power.
You're not seeing the power of people being healed and delivered and set free, which is the full gospel of the message of the kingdom of heaven. If you're not seeing that, then it's like, oh, this is boring.
Right. And not only that, when you compare that, if you're not seeing the power of God in a church, but you're seeing the power of the enemy
in occult.
Well, if you don't have that education, if you're not reading the word, if you're not in it and you don't have that going on, who are you going to think is more powerful?
Right.
It's just kind of, you're going to go, okay, well, they're able to do this and are out here doing all these things. They're just over here singing some songs and telling me to do better and making me feel like crap when I'm in there. You know what I'm saying? Like, with shame and guilt, and telling me I have to do all these things, and I'm going, I don't know how.
From someone that's come out of, we'll just say witchcraft, right? And would you look at that and say that's accurate? Would you look at it from maybe somebody that's into witchcraft and say the church is just very ignorant and doesn't understand their identity and understand their power, and there's a lot of just lack of understanding?
Well, first I want to say I love the church.
Yeah.
And I think that the church is the bride of Jesus Christ. I think that the Western church generally speaking, is not operating in the full power that's available to them. And the reality of his kingdom. And Jesus, everywhere Jesus went, he was saying the kingdom of heaven is like this. He was demonstrating the kingdom of heaven by healing the sick, casting out demons, loving the unlovable, like inviting the rebels to be a part of his ministry. If we look at what the early church, if we read the book of Acts, that's what we're all supposed to be living, right? So I think that there are just many churches that just aren't living in the fullness of what Jesus came to establish. And there's an invitation for more. So if anybody's watching this or listening to this, and maybe they've never seen the power of God, they've never felt the love of God, they've never, seen these things that we're kind of talking about, there's just an invitation, to hunger for more.
And I really do think it's, I don't want it to sound harsh, because I do think it's an ignorance. I don't think it's an intentional thing. And I don't think it's a heart choice. I don't think people are walking around being like, oh, I want people to feel like crap when they're here and leave and feeling guilt. I do not think that's the heart behind that at all. I think they're doing their best with the knowledge that they have and their understanding of the word and what they're reading. But there's more.
Yeah. And I mean, the Pharisees and the Sadducees were doing the best that they could do.
Exactly. And so I think
didn't have any power and didn't know the true
and I think
Jesus.
that's that space that we have to look at, is we just can't come at the Lord, at Jesus, at Holy Spirit, at the Word, as though we have the fullness of understanding, period. We always have to come at it with such a teachable spirit that says, what do you want to show me, God? What do you want me to learn from this? What do you want to reveal to me? And I think as a church, Big C church is what we're talking here. If we keep that heart space and that attitude as we come into our daily devotions with the Lord, it'll change everything. We just can't come from a space of we've got it all figured out.
Know it all.
Well, let me clarify a little bit too, because I 100% hear what you guys are saying and agree with that. What I'm wondering is, in the satanic ritual area, or the witches and stuff like that, when they're hanging out, is there this kind of the church, we got these guys, they're ignorant, they don't know what they're doing,
Yes.
Like,
So thank you for clarifying.
That's what I mean.
Yes.
Like,
So the occult realm, occult realm, the witches, the Satanists.
Because you've been around it, you grew up around it.
They look at the church as a whole. They're banking on the ignorance of the church.
That's what I'm wondering.
Yes. Sorry. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for adding more clarification. Yeah. No, people that serve Satan or are operating in witchcraft, they think that they're like looking at Christians as they don't know anything, right? Mm-hmm. But when they look in the spirit realm, they can actually see if a person, when they look at a Christian, it's like they either will have like a small flame on the inside of them, or they will be like engulfed in light and fire. And that the difference is people that intimately love and know and walk with Jesus in relationship, and those that maybe just like they know about him, but they're living their lives any kind of way they want. So in the spirit realm, it is seen. Like people that walk in power. Like a witch can walk into a room and see who has true power and authority of Jesus because they are yielded to the Lord. Not because they're like, I'm so powerful. It's more so, I'm so in love with Jesus and I'm yielded to him and I'm one with him. That humility, like she was talking about, that's what positions us to be in a place of accessing the greatest power that's in the universe and in every realm.
And that's what
they can see it.
So even they can see it and they can understand it. So when you're in situations, like one of the things I love about you is you have a heart for this and you want to preach the gospel to people that are in witchcraft.
Yeah.
And if they can see, I've just always wondered this question, if they can walk into a room and they can see that person is filled with the Holy Spirit, and they're a follower of Jesus.
Yeah.
And there's not much I can do to them.
Right. Literally.
Because of that and because of the power of God and his protection. Why would they continue to serve the losing team?
Yeah. Deception.
So, I would love to take this because the Lord actually gave me like a metaphor for this to explain it to people. And basically what it's like is it's kind of like you have a prize fighter, right? Who's got the belt. And then you have the guy who's training that he's going to fight him. And he's like, I'm coming after that belt, right? Yeah, I'm getting that. I'm going to take it from you. And he fights and he loses. So what he does is he walks away and he's like, I'm going to train harder. I'm going to come back and I'm getting that belt. That is Satan. That is what he's doing. He gets defeated. But then he leaves and he's like, nope, I'm going to get you next time. I'm going to get you next time. And there's always the next time. Like he's just banking and he's so prideful in what he does and in his power and ability that he's like, no, I'm going to win. And he is just so dead set that he is going to win. He doesn't. We know that. Like he will never win. And as the church, we understand that. But he is so prideful in the way that he just leaves, trains, adjusts, comes back. And I think that's where, as a church, like we have to understand that because he's leaving, training, adjusting, and coming back to try and gain the victory. So we have to be able to, and I think that space that she was talking about that's that space where you are seated in Christ in heavenly places. It is that space where you are clothed in Jesus.
Yeah.
Right? And when you operate in life from those places, when they see you, they see Jesus.
Yeah.
Like it's not even like that's because that's where you've positioned yourself.
Yeah.
Because you don't have the only reason you have any authority is because
of him. I mean, in and of ourselves, we got nothing.
100%.
Like, I want to say that was what got Satan booted out of heaven.
Right.
He said, I will ascend above God. And so he's still trying to do that.
He's still trying to do that.
So people under his control are trying to do that. They're trying to kill, steal, and destroy. And I want to say, too, to what you said earlier, the church knows, right, that Satan is defeated, but not everybody that attends church lives that way.
100%.
There's some Christians that are so scared of every demon behind every rock. They're scared of Satan.
Yeah.
You got to be careful. Well, you really got to be careful about that. Like, well, I don't know if we should, and there's this fear thing that creeps in that's just starts so subtle.
Yeah.
And it's like, we're not, so then.
Which is a way he controls us.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the other piece that I think over the course of this last year with working with survivors of SRA, something that has so impacted me was that the only thing that the enemy has over the church is endurance.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yep. He keeps on
He
coming and
can
coming and coming.
only win when we back off.
Yep.
I want to come back. I want to come back to that.
Yeah.
Where?
Yep.
But we're getting close, I think, to like your encounter with the Lord. So I want to.
Oh, where everything changes.
Yeah, I
where
want
everything
to
changes.
get back to that, and
Yeah.
then I want to follow up with that. So, how does this happen? How do you go from my understanding, you're abused as a young kid, you're brought into satanic ritual abuse, you're brought into the whole witchcraft thing, your life is this, your childhood is these experiences,
Mm-hmm.
you're having supernatural encounters. It's just a normal for you.
Mm-hmm.
You have multiple personalities. You understand how to go in between them. You're like, then all of a sudden you're trafficked and abused from a pimp at
Again and again and again and again. Yeah.
again. You go to church. You believe this is the truth, but you don't understand what to do with it. You
Yeah.
end up in stripping to make some money, so at least you can keep the money, and the lady that's trafficking you doesn't get it. You can have some finances, but you find yourself suicidal. You have an encounter with God. Then you end up going, okay, I'm going to take this vision that God gave me, and I'm going to take it in my own understanding, and I'm
Trying
gonna
to figure it out on my own,
walk
yeah.
this out, and I'm
Yeah.
going to become a model. I'm going to become famous, and I'm going to use that influence to influence my culture, only to find yourself being sold and trafficked
Mm-hmm.
again through that industry. How do we get from that to where you encounter the Lord and get out of it?
Yeah. So the last person that I was sold to was a prince from Africa. And I was with him for a year and experiencing all kinds of luxury, and he actually said that he wanted to marry me. And I was so empty. Like little girls say they want to be princesses when, and here I am dating a prince. Well, in my head, I didn't fully connect the dots that I was actually purchased by him, but at the time. But I just knew I was just empty. I was seeing everything the world had to offer, and it was trash to me because it didn't satisfy my soul. And so I actually had a breakdown moment on the bathroom floor in about Malibu Mansion, and I just lost it, and I gave my life to Jesus. Prior to that, I had been trying to incorporate him in a little bit, but he wasn't actually leading my life. He wasn't the Lord and Savior of my life. I was still leading my life.
You want to pause on that and explain that a little bit more? Because that is powerful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think a lot of people experience that. Like, they get saved and they're like, oh, yeah, this is the truth, and Jesus is amazing, but they're still leading their own lives. And that's what I was doing. I was still trying to figure it out on my own. I was doing it. I was living life how I thought I was supposed to live it. I wasn't living a life where I was acknowledging him in all of my ways and coming to him for leadership and asking for him to lead me. I was leading myself. So I was still my own Lord.
Wow.
Prior.
Yeah.
So when I fully surrendered and gave my life to him, I said, I don't care if I have to live in a cardboard box. I want to be in your will. All of this is nothing. It's trash. I don't want anything outside of your will for me. And from that moment of total surrender, which I wish I could have found that out a lot sooner in life. That would have been great. But the moment of total surrender, everything literally changed from that moment on. And that's when my true healing journey started. When I started having, I got into this, I call it a God cave, where I just started obsessively reading the Word of God. And when I would read it, I would be like, show me that. What does that mean? Whoa, this is crazy. I would talk to him about it. And then I started I would see what I was reading. So I was experiencing the Bible as a movie. I wasn't reading words on a page. I was seeing it, experiencing it, feeling it, taking it all in. Because you got to remember, it was literally alive.
Yeah.
So I came from a background of knowing the spirit realm. You didn't have to convince me that the spirit realm was true. You didn't have to convince me that demons are real. You didn't have to convince me about all of that stuff. So when I'm reading in the Word, I'm like, this is real. And I started to experience it and see it. And it just changed my life forever.
And I just want to pause there, because that is what makes survivors so terrifying to Satan.
Yes.
Right there.
Yep.
Because you have people who understand his world.
Yep.
And understand the spiritual, And when they get saved and they're now on the other side, literally game over, like untouchable. Like it's just, and he knows that. Like he knows that. And then the Lord's like, oh, I can use this. Like, you know how to already operate in this space. You know what the word is saying. You know, and now when you're living for me, you're doing like literally sky. There is no limit.
Yeah.
There's no limit. And so they are so dangerous to the kingdom of Satan that's why he doesn't want survivors free. It's why he wants to keep them bound. It's why he wants to keep them crazy, is because they're literally just powerhouses for the kingdom of God.
Wow. Yeah, and then God uses everything
that
Satan ever did to torture, abuse, harm me, and flips it around and starts using it for my good and for the good of others. And that's where I became more than a conqueror, because I didn't just conquer for myself. I started helping others conquer. That's
the beauty
more
from
than
ashes.
Yeah, exactly.
I want to sit there for a second. That's so amazing. So you have this encounter with the Lord. You fully submit your life to Him, and He actually gives you a new purpose.
Yes.
And with that purpose, how do you figure out what that purpose is? How do you then start helping trafficking victims?
Yeah.
And where do we get to the point where you're now an author and you're helping train other organizations on how to help victims that are coming out of sex trafficking, and specifically helping women that are and kids that are coming out of satanic ritual abuse? Like, where do you find your purpose, and then how does that kind of play out to where we're at now? Because what I'd love to do is actually go through your book a little bit and ask you and Anya some questions. But how do we get to from this encounter
where
with
I am
Jesus
now.
to this book? You know?
Yeah. Well, I actually wrote another book about that. Shameless plug, called Fighting for Your Purpose, because I get that question all the time. Like, how are you not crazy? How can you laugh? How can you actually have joy? Like, what happened between that and here? So there's a whole book about that called Fighting for Your Purpose.
Fighting for Your Purpose.
Yes, where I talk about my story, but then it's not just about me. It shifts into 12 chapters on how anybody can encounter the love of God, overcome trauma, learn how to fight Satan, learn how to figure out their spiritual gifts and find their purpose, etc. Because I get that question all the time.
Where can we find this book?
It's on Amazon or on my website, SulaLael.com. But yeah, you can find my books on Amazon. And so if I could sit down one-on-one with every one of the people that are watching or listening today and pour everything into them possible, that's what that book is.
Okay.
So, but the simple answer is, I became radically in love with Jesus, and His word and His presence became addictive to me.
Yeah.
To feel Him, to see Him, to experience Him, to be with Him. He became everything to me. And so I learned the art of radical obedience. I learned how to, okay, Lord, what do I do for today? And so every day, what are we doing today? Just following Him. I didn't want to lead my life anymore. I knew how bad that ended up. He's just so good. And so, radical obedience to Him. And He's so kind. He knew what I was ready for, because I still had a lot of healing that I needed to walk through, right? After that total surrender, now it was like, okay, I am saved. I've fully given my life to Him. But now it's the renewing of the mind process. It's the healing from the trauma. It's applying the finished work of cross to my body, soul, and spirit. And so it was just a series of where He would lead me into experiences with Him, where He would heal the fractured parts of my soul. So where I was scattered and broken into these different personalities, He started healing me and bringing me back together. And
what was that like the first time you realized He was doing that? And because what I hear from people sometimes, they have the ability and they almost will dabble in going from personality to personality.
Yeah.
What was that like for you when all of a sudden it was all becoming one and it was all getting healed?
Yeah. It was a process, so it didn't happen all at once. I didn't always know when I was switching personalities, by the way.
Yeah,
There was one that I knew.
Yeah.
I knew when I would switch to, and I had a name for her, Little Lulu. was one of my little toddler girl parts. I knew when I would switch to that. I was aware of that because probably she was the one that was around the longest. But I didn't always understand when I was switching parts. So in my healing, what happened was the first time that I had an integration encounter with the Lord, he said, there's part of you, I was in a place of worshiping him and praising him and feeling his presence and just being with him. And he said, there's part of you that you're not letting me into. And I was like, huh? Like, I didn't know what he was talking about. So the sex trafficking was compartmentalized for many years. I did not self-identify as a sex trafficking victim at all. I wasn't living with a full awareness of it. My presenting who I was, that was swept under the rug, tucked away somewhere. I wasn't living with an awareness of that, which a lot of sex trafficking victims don't identify as victims because the trauma, they don't even understand that they are victims. And so in that encounter with the Lord, he said, I said, well, what do you mean? He said, will you let me into that place? And I said, yes, of course. Yes, Lord, come into every place. And so I saw actually a vision of almost like a dungeon basement deep down inside of me. And I was like, yes, come into every place, Lord. And then all of the memories of the sex trafficking started coming back. So that's what integration felt like. It was like, oh my gosh, now I am aware. And that part of me that was separated in a compartment was now mended together as one with me. And now I was living with a full awareness of what that previous part of me had experienced. And now, that part of me was healed. So there was like a progression of those types of experiences and moments with the Lord. I did go through like deliverance and inner healing. There were times where I would do sessions with people because I needed a lot of healing and deliverance and freedom. But I would say that my major, like the most powerful experiences that I've had, it wasn't because there was a codependency on some person helping me with all this stuff in my life. It was because I had a codependency on Jesus. Like those were the moments, the most powerful moments were of deliverance, of healing, of freedom in his word, in prayer with him, where he just started walking me through all of those things.
And I just want to pause for a second because I know for a lot of survivors, what she just said could sound really scary of, oh my gosh, you remembered it all? I don't know that I could handle that.
Yeah.
And that might be something that would be a barrier to being open to integrating or to healing. And so I would just love for you to speak to the grace that the Lord brought to you in that season to be able to handle that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that the Lord allows you to remember what you need to remember too. So for when Jesus is the one that's doing that integration of fractured parts or personalities, he is he's right there with you. So you have the Prince of Peace, the one who legislates, reigns, and rules in peace, who is with you, right? So it wasn't like I was so overwhelmed that I was traumatized and in a panic attack now.
Yeah.
There was a sense of such peace of remembering what I needed to remember. And also, for me, it became my career, my life path, of my calling, my purpose. So everyone that experiences this stuff is not going to have a life purpose to share it, right? For me, God asked me, give your life away so that others could be drawn to know me. So I got on a path of, this is now my career. This is what I am doing to bring glory to the Lord and to help other people that have experienced trauma, no matter what kind of trauma they've experienced. If they hear my story, they know that, hey, there's hope for them to heal. Because if God did it for me, God can do it for anybody. But I love what you said, though, too, because it's not like Jesus is so gentle. He doesn't force people to integrate if they're not ready.
Yeah.
And that's why I say it's a process, because for some survivors of sex trafficking, ritual abuse, or of trauma, because you don't have to experience sex trafficking to be fractured. You could have been in a car accident as a child, and that could fracture your soul because it was too overwhelming to deal with, So Jesus is so kind, and he knows when you're ready, and he's not going to push or force you to integrate. I think there's some people that would say, oh, you have, let me just say it like this. Parts are not demons.
Yes.
You're not evil if you have fractured parts.
No.
It's just your soul. Like when your soul is ready to heal and encounter Jesus and become whole in God's timing, and when he knows you're ready, he does that. So there's no pressure. I have a lot of people that I work with, Anya, you as well, helping captives, helps people like me. It's just so amazing. But, there's no pressure to, you have to integrate.
No.
It's a process.
And I also want to add, because the God who created the mind to fracture, to endure, so that you did not die, is not then going to turn around and flood you with this very memories that fractured you to take you out. So that's not who he is. That's not how it lands and what happens. And so I just think that's really important to make sure that message goes out, so that if there are survivors that are watching this, that would think about or want to integrate, just understanding the heart of the Lord, that he loves you so much that he's not going to give you those memories and have you carry something that you couldn't carry in the beginning, that you can't handle. That's not who he is.
Yeah, he's so loving, so kind.
So part of that's just your process and you're learning through that. And then when does it switch to, now I want to give back? I want to help others that are coming out of this?
The first time I shared my story in 2010.
Okay.
Someone in the audience came up to me and said, "Oh my gosh, I think I was a victim too." I never knew it.
So you're talking 14 years ago.
In 2010.
Yeah.
Yeah.
2024,
So I was like, so I realized that as I share my story, there was an opportunity for people that had been through this to see themselves. And because again, most won't self-identify until they hear these experiences in language that they understand.
Yeah.
So they could watch Googled presentations about this, or they could watch whatever, and it maybe just not realize that's me. But once they hear it in a way that they understand, it was so. And then that started happening every time I started sharing my story. There would be people that would either reach out later or be in the crowd or say, "This happened to my sister. I didn't know. I thought she was just a prostitute strung out on crack." Or this, I didn't realize. I didn't know. And so then I started so from the moment I shared my story, my full story in 2010, the anti-trafficking work began. And I started helping others heal. And
because you're for people that don't know, you're an OG in this, because I'm just being honest. The anti-trafficking work hasn't been around very long. I remember when I was first hearing about it, it was probably 2010 to 2012 was when I was first starting to hear stuff from people that were close to our family that had been trafficked. And at first, I got to be honest, it was hard to believe. You're kind of going, what? Your parents did what? They sold you from your time you were 4, this is really hard. And then all of a sudden you meet other people and they're like, no, this happened to me too. And, but then when we decided, hey, we want to be able to help, we're really ignorant. I'm just being honest, we were thinking, we'll just get a safe house and we'll throw some house parents in there and give them free rent. And if we run into somebody that needs help, we'll just put them in the house and we've done our job, right? We've rescued them. They're free.
They're safe.
They're safe. And then it's that's just the beginning of this long road of recovery. And Jesus can make that road much shorter, but it's still a road of recovery. And we were not prepared for that. And so we realized we need help, started meeting with other organizations, and there
weren't
was
many
hardly any that were around in 2015.
Yeah.
And you're talking 2010. And there just wasn't a lot of organizations that were around. And so I think for other organizations that are running into these things, you've been around longer than most, and you've actually seen the anti-trafficking movement kind of get birthed, so to speak. And so that's probably why when I'm reading your book, I'm like, man, this is just so well thought through and so well explained. But it's because you've actually seen the whole progression of the movement, right? Because I can count on one hand organizations that were around before 2010 that I know of.
I mean, 15 to 20 years ago, our nation wasn't even having these conversations. We were just prostitutes that were being arrested and criminalized
100%.
Until laws started changing, statistics started coming out, and then it was whoa, these are sex trafficking victims. They're not criminals. We're still teaching that, we
Yeah,
still have
yeah.
we still have victims of trafficking that are being arrested, but we're getting there as a nation, and I feel like we are now at another wave of awareness similar to 15 to 20 years ago as it pertains to satanic ritual abuse and
Yep.
occult ritual abuse.
Yep.
Where right now we don't have a lot of statistics about it because our main National Human Trafficking Hotline doesn't even ask the question if someone's been through satanic ritual abuse. They don't even screen for that. So we don't have a lot of statistics out there just yet, but we're starting to see survivors coming out explaining what happened to me. And you get the girl, the Latina who has experienced ritual abuse. You get the black girl from Cali that has been going to a church who has experienced ritual abuse, and the white girl from Utah who was a Mormon and has experienced ritual abuse. And there's going to be similarities in how they were fractured, in the rituals they went through, and the experiences they've had in the spirit realm, and the ways that they were controlled and manipulated, because there's a common way to break a soul.
Yep.
And to control someone's mind and to own someone. So you have completely different cultural backgrounds that all have very similar experiences.
Yeah.
And so people are starting to come out more and more. We're starting to see laws to be changed. Utah passed a law regarding identifying ritual abuse. So we're just on the cusp.
Okay.
And I just want to say again, thank you to Helping Captives. Thank you for your yes to just say we're going to do something about this, even though you didn't fully understand when you launched. And thank you for your continued yes to say, okay, we see what's happening and we're going to be a part of the solution, because not everybody has the radical faith that Helping Captives operates in. And so it's just so refreshing. It's so refreshing and so necessary. So
That's awesome. What there are some hotlines now that, from my understanding, are starting to ask that question.
Yes.
So do you know of one that is, and
Yes.
have any data maybe from?
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
one?
So Rescue America is a phenomenal hotline that serves survivors of sex trafficking that call in with help escaping their traffickers and their pimps.
Yeah, and that's Allison's organization.
Yes, yeah, phenomenal organization. Love them. And what we see with Rescue America is about 20%. The latest statistic is about 20% of the survivors that call seeking to escape have experienced occult ritual abuse.
Okay.
Which is a very high number.
Yeah.
It's 2 out of 10.
It's a very high
Yeah.
number.
Yeah.
And I want to say those are the confirmed cases. Some are suspected, and so it's not even accounted for. So, yeah. And it's not just the anti-trafficking movement that these survivors are showing up into, seeking help. They're showing up into churches.
Yeah.
They're showing up into counseling offices. They're showing up. They're seeking to get help anywhere. So it's like
Detox centers, homeless shelters.
correct.
Yeah.
So
Hospitals.
everyone needs to be trained.
Yeah.
Everyone needs to be aware, because there's this concept of trauma-informed care. But if you don't understand the trauma, you can't be trauma-informed. And
Right.
so you have to be trauma-informed on the various types of trauma of the people you're serving. And occult ritual abuse is a lot more prevalent than people realize.
And in my experience, unless you're asking the right questions,
You
you're
wouldn't know.
not getting the answers.
Yeah.
Because they have in their history brought it up to somebody, been like, what? I don't even know what you're talking about. What do you mean that like you're getting pulled from your body in the middle of the night and demons are coming to you? Like, what is going on in your life? No, those are nightmares. That's not real. That doesn't happen. Right? So that's what, just out of ignorance, they
Must
get
be
that.
schizophrenia.
Right? Yeah. There's, it's got to be all these diagnoses. And so out of that experience, they've learned, I don't talk about this. I don't mention this, and I'm not going to say anything. And so I think that that's important, is why it's important to know what questions to ask, and just so that we can know if it's even on the radar.
Yeah.
Right. I want to switch gears now to our final part of the podcast, and we might end up splitting this up because there's so much information and it's been such a good one. But I want to actually get into your book. Are you good with that? I want to ask you guys some questions. So, it's amazing because you have just a normal guy that has faith in Jesus, but does not have a master's degree in counseling. and you do have a master's degree in counseling, and you're actually a survivor. So it's a really unique opportunity for me to actually ask some questions that I have had in the past is learning this, and some things that I still get excited when I'm reading. I'm like, oh, that's a new one that I didn't understand. I think it's been fun working with Anya. I get to give her a little bit of, we have great conversations, and she gets to explain to a normal knucklehead man like what these concepts of counseling are and all the abbreviations, and then I will occasionally let her know this is what that means in the street. So we have some fun. So I think the first thing I wanted to share, and I'm just going to walk through this linearly of how you wrote out the book, but the United States is one of the top 3 nations in which trafficking originates. Doesn't this just happen overseas? What do you like? Who wants to tackle that one? Because that's my original thought.
That's what most
people think. Watching the movie Taken with Liam Neeson, and my mind is going, oh, they're getting kidnapped, thrown into containers, and taken overseas. And then all of a sudden, I'm finding that's not really what's going on.
Except for we are one of the top consumers. Yeah, is why we are one of the top nations. Is because if you just look at our culture, if you look at our society, right, it is everywhere. It permeates everything from, like we discussed earlier, a very young age. Very young age. And so we are literally cultivating a culture of consumers.
And even the porn industry as well, like the U.S. is like one of the top, because here's
you
the
have
thing.
a thing in here that says 70% of female victims are trafficked into the commercial sex industry.
Yeah,
because there's a demand.
Yep.
Men, I'm going to say, and women.
Yes.
Want to have these sexual fantasies. And it's interesting, a lot of the customers or buyers that get arrested or traffickers that get arrested, for a lot of them, it started with porn.
Yeah. Because
there's a sense of seeing it, getting addicted to seeing it, and then they want to experience it.
Yeah. So it's never the gateway.
Yeah. The hunger never is satisfied until they start acting it out with really victims, but they tell themselves, oh, this person wants to be here.
Yeah, it's really easy to go from, especially when you're like like for me, I think it was like 9 or 10 when I first started seeing pornography.
Wow, yeah.
And that messes with your head, and you can't really help but start looking at women as objects. You're going through, then you get a little older and you're going through puberty, and so you mix all that together, and it's a little bit rough. Of a situation you find yourself in, but it's not that hard to go from I'm looking at this on a screen, why don't I go to the strip club and actually see it in person, and then, well, this is fun, but I want a little more, why don't I start having them come over to my house and paying for private parties and purchasing escorts. Like, that's what I find when I'm talking to guys that have been purchasers. That's always typically starts, that's kind of how it progresses.
Yeah. And the victims, it's life or death for them. They have to project a fantasy.
Yes.
So, and that's also part of the neurobiology of trauma too. Like, you could just be in autopilot, smiling and looking like it's consensual, but it's
or
really
a part
the path
comes forward.
Yeah, right.
Depending, since we've been talking about it, the part that is her role.
Right. Comes forward.
That is her job.
Yeah.
So that's who comes forward.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the buyer is like, oh yeah, she's excited. She wants to be here. But really, they have to sell a fantasy because they have a quota. If I don't get enough money, I could get my head smashed in. If I don't, so that's why it's like having these types of conversations are so important now for men, because you can't, it's when you're like, oh, I'm just behind my screen, or I'm just meeting up with this girl at a hotel, I'm not hurting anybody. I'm so sorry to say, yes, you are.
Yeah.
And there's help for the buyers too. Just like I got healed and delivered and set free, and that Jesus met me and helped me. Like, that's Jesus can meet people that have a sex addiction or a porn addiction. Like, he can meet them too. It is not a victimless activity. And so, but it's easy to believe, oh, they want to be here because it looks like their body is responding, or it looks like they're excited. But that is a fantasy that the victim has to project in order to stay alive.
I think that was a big one for me. I think part of also learning about this is you start. I don't know how it's sometimes when you're on screen it seems so far away. So it doesn't seem real, right? So if I had a cousin that was into porn, I wouldn't want to watch my cousin on the screen because now that's my cousin, right? But all of a sudden this isn't a real human in your head kind of because you've never met them, you're never going to see them, they might be in Hollywood. You don't really understand that some of the people, because I'm assuming in the life you've been around, you've probably been around the porn industry too, like how many of them might be being forced, tricked, or manipulated, coerced into that. So now you're sitting there watching somebody on screen that is actually, and you're perpetuating their trauma. You're perpetuating the victimhood that they're going. You're part of the problem. They may be. You don't know if they're being held at gunpoint behind that camera. You have no clue what's going on. You just see what's going on in the camera. And that really hit me as a young guy when I was starting to hear the stories and understand. You're like, oh wow, this isn't a victimless crime. This isn't a victimless sin. Like this isn't just me by myself at home, hidden in the bedroom, watching this. And it's not impacting anybody because that's what you tell yourself. Oh, I'm not impacting anybody. I'm not actually cheating on anybody. I'm not actually sleeping with anybody. Like this is just me and the phone. And that's not reality.
It's not. And it's so hard as a victim you move from victim to survivor where you're no longer being exploited. And the process to get your life back after that and to get videos and pornographic content and pictures
almost impossible
removed. It is so a journey. And every time, like when you know that there's still pictures or pornographic content out there, that you're still being exploited even though you're not in it physically anymore. Every time they click on that is another click of exploitation. So it's like that's another part of the healing process is trying to go after getting all of those videos and all of that content removed.
Wow.
Yeah.
The last thing you got in this chapter I want to talk on real quick is it says up to 95% of sex trafficking victims have a history of childhood sexual abuse. Do any of you guys want to tackle that?
You can probably speak to that as a counselor, just like what you see.
Like, do you think that's true? That seems like a high statistic to me.
100.
And so
in your experience,
I'll just say that my response is actually, I don't know from sitting here, from all the survivors that we have worked with, I cannot from memory recall a survivor that did not have childhood sexual abuse.
Yeah.
And you've helped over 200 at this point.
So that's just like, and I'm not going to sit here and say I haven't, but I cannot recall currently as I start to go through and think of the survivors and their stories. I cannot recall one that did not have childhood sexual abuse. Mm-hmm. Most of them consistent and chronic, like not a one-time event.
Yeah.
Because I've read statistics up to the point where it says 1 out of 3 or 1 out of 4 girls will be abused by the time they're 18, and 1 out of 5 or 1 out of 6 boys will be abused by the time they're 18.
Yeah.
And you just, how do we stop this? I mean, it just seems overwhelming.
And that first statistic was people in the sex industry. That wasn't victims of sex trafficking. So that's women that are in the porn industry. That's people that are, or anybody in the porn industry, or anybody that's stripping and dancing, or anybody that's escort. So 95% of them have had sexual abuse in their childhood. So we know that all of them are not victims of sex trafficking, but almost all of them have had sexual abuse in their childhood. So was it really their choice to end up in the sex industry if they have trauma of sexual abuse in their childhood? If their value of their body and of their self-worth was taken from them at an early age? Like, is it really choice? Like, if the trauma was healed, would they still be a porn star? Would they still be a stripper? And so that's why for people that are enjoying the sex industry and consuming and purchasing and engaging with it. It's like you don't know the trauma of the person that you're receiving services from. You don't know if they're a victim of sex trafficking or if they're saying, no, I'm in this because this is how I want to hustle and make a living, and I don't have a pimp or a trafficker, and I was never trafficked. But if that trauma hadn't happened to them in their childhood, would they have still chose that path?
Yeah, that's
Big
not
question.
the, I mean, the
Big
reality
question.
is that no woman like dreams of being a prostitute when they're 6 years old, 7 years
Right.
old. Like that just isn't a thing. Like even in junior high, no one's like, you know what I want to do after high school? Man, I'm gonna go prostitute myself, and I just cannot wait for that day. That is my dream.
Yeah.
You don't hear that,
Yeah,
You don't
something
hear-
It's the
happens.
trauma. It's
right?
the trauma.
Like
Yeah.
you don't hear that. But when they've been told from a young age that their body is not their own, that they don't get to have a say of what happens to it,
And this is
then
how
that
you get
actually-
love and value.
right? Then what happens is there's this twisted feeling of control with the belief of this is what I'm good for, what I'm made for, and at least now I can be in control of it.
Yep. So good.
I'm going to run through a couple of these. I thought this was really
Yeah.
good. It said red flags to share with others. So this is I'm assuming is from a person that is being potentially trafficked for them to see red flags and what to share
Yeah.
with others.
So this is like, everybody listen up, because if you see this, then somebody could potentially be
okay. So
exploited.
you're saying the big one is dreams are being sold to you that seem too good to be true. Traffickers often offer their victims the promise of a better life, such as a job opportunity or chance to travel to a new city or country. When I interviewed a man, I won't say his name, I might bring him back on, but he was a pimp, and he got saved in prison, and now he's a pastor. But when I talked to him, he said that's 100% what they would do. He
Yeah,
said all
sell
we would
dreams.
do is we
Yeah.
would sell dreams. We'd
Yep.
figure out what their dream is, and we'd tell them we had access
Exploit
to
it. Yep.
You want to be a model? I got connections to a modeling
Yep.
industry. You want to be an actress? We got connections
It's the
to
bait.
that. You
It's the
wanna-
bait to hook.
Yeah.
Yep.
So they literally dream salesmen.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Great salesman.
Yeah. And this dude's a good-looking cat. He's got a lot of charisma, like the whole thing.
And they're
Yeah.
going to present like they can actually
Yeah. So you would
provide
actually
the dream.
Yeah.
think like, oh, he's probably connected because
Yeah.
he's got that whole aura about him.
Yeah.
So new friends online. That's probably something that was a little different maybe back when you were getting into this. But now, I mean, like how much of the grooming happens online?
It's the safest way for a trafficker to find new victims is to start online.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
Like, so now someone doesn't have to kidnap someone from a mall. There's a lot of risk with that. People seeing.
Yeah.
You could start the process to see, can I control them online? If you can control them online, then you meet up with them.
Just through chat rooms and DMs
Oh yeah.
and all
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. So
Kind
Free-
of test the waters.
A free one-way ticket being given to you for a fun trip or business opportunity.
yeah.
Yeah. This is someone much older that you don't really know taking interest in dating you and spoiling you with lots of free stuff. This is CJ's story. You know, hearing
Yeah.
that at 13 and finding somebody
That's
that
the grooming
wanted to-
process.
Yeah.
Lots of gifts. So like
Yeah.
young girl, young
Literally
boy,
thinking this guy loves me, he's going to be a dad to me, and then all of a
Yeah.
sudden everything gets flipped on its head.
especially if you're not used to, like if you have experienced poverty or you're not used to nice things and someone shows up, and I want to say this could even be like a boy or a teenager and an older
Yeah,
woman,
an upper
like is
class,
like,
yeah.
oh yeah, I'm gonna start
Yeah.
buying you Gucci, I'm gonna start buying you all this stuff, this is what you deserve, and like just out of nowhere somebody older that's trying to buy you all this stuff, it's not free. They're building a record of debt, and you're going to have to work for that eventually. No older person starts buying all this nice stuff for a brand new minor that they just met
Right.
without expecting something in return.
Yeah. When someone tries to isolate you from your family and friends to convince you to be in a relationship solely dependent on them. And I feel like from almost all the stories I've heard or talk with people, this is part of that process too. It's almost like they bring them in, try and get them to fall in love with them or bring attention to them, and then they start that isolation process and trying to get them to just fully rely on them. Is that something you experience?
It's intentional, like, codependency of, like, you can't survive without me. I'm the only one that matters. Like, get you away from your family, get you away from any healthy relationships. And then when you're isolated and you have no one that you feel like you can reach out to, whether that's true or not, you believe that you can't reach out to anybody, that nobody would understand or help you. You kind of feel like, well, I'm stuck in this.
Or they tell you you can't make money. You can't make money on your own doing this. You need me. Like,
or no one will ever love you. No, you can't do any. You're never going to be able to get a regular job now. Look what you've been doing. Nobody's going to hire you. So you feel like all you have is them.
And I even want to go, our heart obviously would always be to prevent this ever from happening to anyone. So I would even just back that way up of that original statement. So for you young adults, for you young ones, understanding that if you have someone who is trying to plant these thoughts and ideas in your head that your family is not safe, that they're not good, and those are new, fresh ideas, and they're trying to isolate you and separate you, that's not good at all, like at all in any way, shape, or form. So there is an undercurrent, an underlying motive in that. And so just to be aware of that, like even if Endgame isn't being trafficked, there's some reason, there is some reason that they want to isolate you, remove you from your support system, and get you alone. And it's toxic, and it's not going to be safe.
Yeah. Anytime you get into drugs, traffickers often use drugs to control their victims. So that was one of the things, like, hey, anytime you get into drugs or underage drinking at parties, they're often targeted. What would you say to little 14-year-old Sula at that time?
I mean, I didn't, don't do drugs, guys. But also alcohol, though, too, because that's kind of one of the ways that it starts out, like, oh, I'll buy you alcohol. I mean, I was the 14-year-old girl standing at the liquor store trying to get someone to buy me, at that time, Cisco or Mad Dog 2020. I like the fruity drinks. I was a baby. It had to taste like candy. But yeah.
So real.
Oh my gosh. I thought I was such a big girl. But anyway, yeah, so it's like, you're trying to escape the reality of trauma and pain and numb it. And so, somebody giving you alcohol, a lot of the time, if they're introducing these things to you, they're going to try and go farther than you want to go.
Yeah. Once you're kind of, because you get numb, you're not thinking, you're not in sobriety.
Right.
A lot of bad decisions happen in those situations. A new job that pressures you to quickly relocate. That would be a red flag. Abusive relationships can also potentially be in a relationship with someone who's deeply addicted to pornography is at risk.
Yep.
Pornography addiction, like we talked about, can lead into a desire to act out those fantasies.
Yep.
This one's the one that we all learned growing up, being lured to catch a ride with a stranger.
Yep.
Right.
That's
so
what people think it's only. They think it's only that.
We get down to number 11 and we're here, but that's all we ever are trained on,
right.
ever talked about with our parents or school. And there's all these other ones. They might say don't do drugs and alcohol, but all these other ones I'd never heard about, and so we really got into this.
Yeah.
And then I want to talk about this one. This is a big one. Running away from home puts you at risk.
Yeah.
But there's so many young people that being at home puts them at risk too. So how do we work through that?
Yeah, and I just want to couple that with the ones we just talked about, including this one, of one of those red flags would also be having someone you've met online wanting to meet you in person.
Yeah.
So
that you don't know.
You don't know, right? They
have a fake profile, probably.
You think you know, and so I'm just saying, I don't care how old you think they are, where you think you're going, that's a massive red flag.
Way too many of those.
Right? If you have met somebody online that you have never met in real life, and you do not know them, and they want to meet up with you in public, don't do it.
Profile looks like Justin Bieber, but in real life,
don't do it.
They're actually like a 65-year-old fat man, like in a basement.
Yeah.
Masturbating. To your picture. So I know how gross and aggressive that is, but I want you to see and imagine that. You think, oh, he's so cute. He's my age. He's this. And he's really some sick, nasty, oily, greasy man that smells like rotten onions. That can't wait to meet up with you.
Yeah. And they're everywhere. They're sliding into your DMs. They're on the dating apps. They're everywhere. It's not just one.
Disclaimer, and if you're overweight, I'm so sorry. I was not trying to be judgmental, but just for the sake of that may have, I was like, oh, I felt a little bit. I felt a little bit of conviction on that.
15-year-old girl, right?
Yes. So I'm if you're older and if you're overweight, please forgive me. I did not mean to be judgmental by that statement. I just wanted it to be like an aggressive comparison.
Especially if you smell like onions.
No, I'm definitely judging you if you smell like onions. Go take a shower and use appropriate deodorant. No, I'm just kidding. Right. Caleb, get us back on track.
Next.
Like, the problem is I can get engaged in this conversation.
Yep, just keep going. Just keep going. What is the next thing in the book?
Victim. So I think this is a real interesting one, and I would love if you could talk about this and if you're trained in this, because a reluctance to make eye contact. Why would a reluctance to make eye contact potentially be something to look out for if you're trying to identify a victim?
Yeah.
Why is that such a big one?
So old school pimp culture was don't make eye contact with any male unless you're getting my money from them. That's what old school pimp culture was. The old school pimps, it was like, that was a rule. If you make eye contact with someone that you're not getting money to bring back to me, then there's going to be consequences. It was also on the streets where if you make eye contact with another pimp, then basically they can take you from your previous pimp because you broke the rule. So that's the first thing, is there is like a school of thought that this is rule, this is law. So girls were taught you can only look at shoes, and it's your pimp by the shoes he's wearing, that you can only make eye contact with your pimp. So every survivor has not been programmed to obey that. But another reason why not making eye contact would be from the trauma and the shame of what you've been through, because anytime you're interacting with a man, if you make eye contact, what if they want to rape me? What if they like what they see and they want to hurt me? And so it's a sense of like avoiding, like it's triggering to be around men. And you don't know, okay, they're smiling, they're trying to talk to me too much. Are they going to hurt me? And so the other side is like the trauma and the shame of not wanting to make eye contact with men and trying to avoid, because men are just triggering in general.
Yeah, that was an interesting one for me to learn, but more on the old school pimp culture and just trying to like really understand that, because that was something new for me.
Yeah.
And being a guy, you'll occasionally run into that, and it's a big deal when they can finally look you in the eyes, and have a conversation. Another person speaking for them. This is a big one, especially if Anya, I would love you to talk about that, because one of the things you do a great job at is you have amazing training that you actually offer people that work with potential girls coming out of trafficking, whether that be a detox center or a hospital, but actually working with professionals. Why would another person speaking for them, or that person having a lack of control over their identification, be a red flag?
Yeah, so the identification piece is pretty simplistic, and just if they don't have ID, they will struggle to access any resources that will allow them to escape. And so that is a control factor. So they hold their ID as a controlling piece. And then the not being able to speak for themselves, that's mainly because they don't want to say the wrong thing. They're being controlled in their answers. So they may speak for themselves, but they're also going to be like glancing and looking for that like approval of, am I doing okay? Because they're very stressed in that situation. So what that's going to look like is, for instance, they're going to be in front of somebody who they don't want to find out that they're being trafficked or that they're that they're with their pimp or handler. Sometimes also they're not with their trafficker. They're with a handler that has been assigned to them to make sure and watch them and to make sure that they don't get out of pocket, which means that they don't do something they should not do. That's breaking the rules,
or
per se.
sometimes it's a bottom girl, so you would be, for me as a guy, I wouldn't be as aware of it.
It could be two women,
because
totally.
I would go, oh, this is just her and her friend.
Yeah.
Or an aunt or a sister or something of that sort. They kind of present that way. Or mom,
Yeah.
And so they're going to be looking a lot like, am I saying the right thing? Am I doing the right thing? Am I being okay? They're looking for that reassurance that they're not going to get in trouble and get beat when they're afterwards.
Yeah.
So it's literally a survival piece that they just want to make sure they're doing and saying the right thing, that they're not putting out any red flags. And so they're probably not even aware that their actions are speaking louder than their words are, which is why we need to train people, because the actions are what's going to speak louder than what their words are, because they're going to be saying, I'm safe at home. Everything's fine. Nobody's making me do anything that I don't want to do, right? All of those questions that we just expect victims to just say yes or no to because we've asked them. And really the reality of those things are, like, it's important to ask, but if you're not really noticing something and building rapport and having conversation and fostering that sense of felt safety and trust, they're just going to look at you and give you the answers that they know you want.
Yeah, and that's just scripted or rehearsed answers.
Yeah,
definitely.
like, are you safe at home? Yes. Okay, you know how easy it is to just say yes?
Yeah.
Like, that doesn't take a lot.
And I think it's important for, like, service providers that have to do some type of an intake, whether it's counseling, whether it's the ER, whether it's law enforcement, taking a statement. Like, I think it's important to talk to the individual by themselves, because you don't know if that second person with them is a trusted, safe person, or if they could be somehow involved in the abuse. So saying something like, hey, this is part of our policies. We have to talk to people by themselves. So it's not like the potential victim is requesting to speak alone. It's like, no, this is what we just have to do. Like, that's part of the trauma-informed care and the felt safety is being able to have a conversation where nobody that could potentially be a handler, a trafficker, an abuser, an exploiter is present to overhear what's being disclosed.
Yes, 100%. Anytime you can get them alone. I always think, like, the best opportunity, like in a hospital, is when they have to go for x-rays or go for some type of test. That's when you should be asking some of those questions.
It's interesting you guys say that, because as a dad, I was very frustrated when we went to the doctor and they said, as soon as my daughter Zoe turns 13, then we don't have access to her health file. And
Correct.
Welcome
State
to
of Washington. Yes, that is correct.
Gosh.
Unless so now we don't have, she could have an abortion and we don't get to know about it, or just whatever. And that was really hard for my wife and I. But when you're talking, I'm going, but now I see it's hard, because, like, with a normal, healthy family, that would be infuriating, right? You're going, what are you talking about? This girl's 13, my daughter's 13. But then when you have a situation where you have a young person who's not in a safe situation, not with a parent, this could be a life-saving situation for them.
Yeah, and that's where that law came from.
Wrestling with that and trying to process that of, when you have the government wanting to have more control over your children than you do, but on the flip side, having some policies that might save a person's life. Like, it's this weird balance of trying to figure that out. I do think, being able to have your kid and be able to say, hey, listen, if you want us in there, you have the right to ask us to be in there. We would love to be in there with you. Because obviously it seems so weird to me to be like, what do you mean my daughter is 13 years old? Like, I don't want her making life-altering decisions at 13. Like, dear Lord, if I had control over everything for myself at 13, even at, like, 16, I would have made some horrendous decisions. So Trying to process that is what a lot of families are going through right now currently.
Well, that's why it's important, like you said, what you're alluding to is having a healthy family dynamic, right?
Yeah.
So if you have a healthy family dynamic where your kids, your teen, feels like they can come to you and say, Dad, somebody sent me a picture of their dick.
Yeah.
Let's just keep being real of how things happen, right? If your daughter feels like she can come to you and say that, and she's not going to be judged or shamed or, well, I'm taking your phone away because, like, if you have a healthy family culture where your child can come to you when weird, sick things are going on, or they see or they experience something like that, and they know, oh, I can talk to Dad, I can talk to Mom.
Yeah.
They're not going to judge me or ground me because I've experienced something that wasn't my fault.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be punished for opening up about something that wasn't my fault. Or even if something was my fault, I can talk to them and we're going to work through it as a family. Often when young people feel like they can't speak to their family, that's where the secrecy, and that's actually secrecy is a vulnerability. So it's important to have those family conversations. Like, and I say this to any parents, like, can your child, can your teen come to you and say what I just said? How would you respond to that? Are you going to stay neutral in your facial expressions and be there for them and help them work through how to be safe online?
Yeah.
Or are you going to get mad at them because and make it their fault because somebody's sending them pictures of their genitalia?
Yeah. And we talk about this in our trainings that we offer.
How do you, as a dad, my brain would go, okay, I would be like, thank you so much for talking to me about it. And then I would be trying to figure out, okay, so how do I deal with this now with this young man? Because I would be like, one, I would probably understand he doesn't know any different. He's probably just doing what he's been trained. But I also want to put a little fear of the Lord.
No, you handle it with whoever did it, right?
You know what I mean?
Right.
But
you handle it with
do
them.
It in a way of like, hey,
but you want your child to feel safe coming to you.
You try and figure out like what legally, like what can I do as a man that's an adult?
Right.
Talk to this young man, but let him know in a because there's a part of you that wants to be like, this is my daughter and she has a dad.
Well, and circulation of pornographic content, that's actually, people don't realize
but
that.
Then some of these young kids don't know what they're even doing. So it's like this mix of, hey, I need to talk to you. You're clearly going through some stuff. You've almost been groomed yourself to ask my daughter for this photo.
Well, straight up, it's like
at the same time, brother. Like, this is my daughter, and it's over.
How you handle it with them, do what you got to do. But your child should be able to come to you about anything and not feel judged or condemned. And your child should also be able to say, like, I'm telling my dad.
100%.
Yeah.
If your kid can say, if your teenage girl can say when someone approaches them online, is asking for nudes, sending nudes of themselves, if they could say, oh yeah, my dad has access to this account, like, creep, I'm blocking you. If they have that type of like open, honest, safe culture in the family, they are not going to be vulnerable. And that's why traffickers will not target them.
And that's why that BARC app is so important, and for kids to understand, like, hey, your parents might want to have access to this stuff, and not out of not trusting you, but just out of keeping you safe, and having those conversations and figuring out, okay, they're getting older, what do I need to have access to, what do I not have access to, how do we work through that? Knowing who your kids are talking to is so important.
It's vital in this day and age.
Important.
Yeah, it is vital.
And honestly, I don't even know why kids need smartphones until they're adults. Like, just keep it real.
Yeah.
Like, there's no reason, like, to have it. You can just
parental controls.
Go old school phone, like, if you need to get a hold of your kid. But there's just so much that goes wrong.
I mean, but I was being exploited when I had a pager. So, yes, technology is a big part of the problem. But, it's like safe environment and culture and at home with family is like, that's what makes people strong and not vulnerable.
Yeah.
So awareness should not promote fear. Awareness, like having these conversations around the dinner table, should empower your young people to feel like, oh yeah, that can't happen to me because I know about it. Not, I'm so scared,
This next one, you got tattoos or branding. This one's always been interesting to me and challenging because I'm like I look at half of our program staff. They got tatted legs, tatted sleeves. They got sleeves and sleeves.
They got more tatted skin than they have untatted.
I mean, they got more tattoos than the guy that puts the tattoos on himself. I'm like, how would you possibly know if this person? Oh, she's got tattoos. She's branded. Like, how would you even?
Yeah. I think that when you start to like understand like the symbolism and the markings and like what certain tattoos and stuff mean, the simple question of if somebody is tatted that maybe is presenting other areas of they could be vulnerable, they could have experienced trauma. It's like, hey, where'd you get that tattoo?
Yeah,
like, tell me what that means.
Yep.
And they start saying, oh, in California, I got this one. Okay, well, where'd you get that? I love your tats. Like, be interested, like genuinely. Well, this one was in Florida.
Like to talk about their ink.
Yeah. There's meaning to it, right? This one was in Florida. This one's well, what about this one? I don't want to, they don't want to talk about.
And also some of them are pretty brazen. Like I was just in Vegas last weekend, and we were at an In-N-Out, and a girl walked in with her pimp. It was 100%, and I knew it. And she just had it right here.
Their name.
Like, it was just like boom,
Yeah.
and I mean it was overtly obvious, and so some of them are just you can just tell by the situation. And
we love to help.
Placement.
We love to help them get these things covered up. And
a lot
of the tattoo artists love
or
covering
Jesus
them
will
up.
just come in and remove them.
Yeah, that was a crazy
overnight.
story.
We've seen that
That's
too.
a whole nother story.
Bananas.
Well, and also the markings thing is important too, even for like service providers. Like if someone comes into the ER and they have cuts and scars or burns in certain patterns on the body, that is a huge indicator of ritual abuse.
Yeah, or words.
Yeah.
Like that appear to have been carved.
Yeah.
Into them. Mm-hmm. That is
All right, we're gonna move on to the next part.
All right.
It's just so but it's just so real.
Yeah,
and this
it
is like
is.
everyday life for you guys.
And I do want to just shout out to a local hospital that I was really impressed with, because they had someone that came in that had a questionable tattoo, and I loved that they reached out to us and they had us come in. They had me come in and just meet with her and talk with her and look at the tattoo, and so we just kind of it was something that just was really awesome in the way that they handled it in that partnership. So the word's getting out there. People are getting educated.
What is this wasn't something I was really wanted you guys to talk about when you're interacting with a potential victim. I think this is something people are nervous about. They're like, well, what do I do? I hear this all the time. Like, what do I do if I see something? What do I say? How do I have a conversation? So first question would be, what do you do if you see somebody you potentially think is a victim of trafficking? And then the second one would be, well, let's just start there. And then what would you say if somebody thought that you were being trafficked? What would they do in that situation?
I mean, really the first thing is they may not know that they are being trafficked, because it's the nature of complex trauma bonding. It's the nature of the abuse and the experiences that they've had. But the first thing is you would want to build trust and build rapport.
Yes.
So don't be weird. just don't be weird. That's the first thing. But you want them to know that, like, if you're going to start asking the questions, you better have something that you can do to help.
Yes.
You better have that hotline number that you can call, or know in your area, like, what are the steps to actually follow through, when you have identified someone. But some simple questions are just based on like, and if you can do it organically in conversation, even better. It's not always possible, but let's say it's someone walks into the diner, goes to the bathroom, you're assuming because you see the tattoo, you see the dude they're with, in that situation, and you're in the bathroom washing hands, like, hey, like, are you good? Like,
are you safe?
Yeah, are you safe? Is there, I'm just reaching out, just want to know, there's some things that I know about with trauma, and I want to make sure that you're good, and it seems like some stuff that maybe you're experiencing could be similar, and see what they say. That's one approach.
I heard another one that I heard was really good is, hey, if you know anybody that is in this situation, here's a card, or here's some information or a number you can reach out to.
Yeah,
So
that's the most easy way.
You're not really telling them, I think you are. It's like, hey, in case you or somebody in case somebody is in this situation. Like, here you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good.
But I think what's interesting, you said build trust, but then the second part, which is so important, and that takes, like, even when people come into our organization, it doesn't just happen overnight. I mean, it helps now that you've been doing it for a while. You have but it's really the other clients that are in the house that I think help really build the trust, because when somebody comes right in off the street, there's still this little piece of like, can I trust you? But then when you have other clients that are there, they go, hey, no, they're for real. It helps. But I think it's interesting. The building trust is so important. But then, why is offering choices so important?
Oh, yeah.
And this is all over the book. You got to build trust with them, and you got to offer them choices, collaborate with them, and then help empower them to make a decision. Why are those two things so important?
I do want to just look at that piece, though, real quick, of building trust, because I think there's something really important to understand about survivors in general, and that's that they read a room and people amazingly. So if you are freaking out inside because you're like, oh my gosh, I think this person's being trafficked, and all of you is feeling really anxious and really uppity, they pick up on that like you would not believe. It has been their survival tactic to understand who's walking in that door, who's present, and immediately. Like, they have to be able to read someone so fast, right? And so I would just, if you start to feel yourself amping up because you think this might be the situation, take some deep breaths, calm yourself down. Because when you come in with a calm, loving presence, that's going to be felt, and that's going to foster almost a much more opportunity for an immediate trust and rapport.
Right.
That's so good.
Because you're going to feel
That's good.
safe.
Yeah.
And they know what unsafe feels like.
Yeah.
Unsafe feels anxious and fearful, and does that make sense? Like that. So they're going, you're no different than they are, that I am. Like, you're all internally just as chaotic. Like they can feel that. They literally can see it and pick up on it because it's a survival technique. So when we go into house and building trust and rapport and choices, all of that we teach our staff, and we discuss how that we can internally regulate ourselves so that when we are in a situation where a survivor is struggling, we call it co-regulation, right? Like, we have to regulate ourselves so that we can help them learn to regulate them. And in that, then they start to go, oh, okay, you know what? You're here to help me. You're able to stay calm when I can't. And that begins to build that trust. And so as we're presenting that way, whether it's in a situation that's out in the public or within our home, and then we're offering choice, and we're saying, no, you're in control here. What do you want to do?
Yeah.
Here are your choices.
And I want to speak to the choice thing, just even practically, like, let's say that someone's not in a home or already in a program or attending a church or in a space where there's community and trust being built. Like, to the person that is just now first contact with someone that has potentially experienced severe trauma, has experienced trafficking, giving them choice. Another reason why that's so important is we have maybe thousands of triggers that could be going on the inside of us, and there's no way for any person to identify and know all of the triggers of a victim of sex trafficking or someone that's experienced ritual abuse, right? So giving them choice allows them to choose what is least triggering for them. So example, you have the child investigator that brings in a victim into their office, and they're about to take their statement, or they're about a forensic interview, or they're about to whatever, right? And so let's say they have a brand new couch in their office that's amazing that they just purchased. It's like they're really excited. Oh, this couch is so comfortable. And then they have like some wooden chairs. If they tell the child, okay, come on in and have a seat on the couch, that's not choice. It would be more so, come on in and have a seat wherever you'd like. Because you don't know if that child was always raped on their uncle's couch. So when they sit into the couch, it immediately puts them in that state of feeling triggered, panicking. Is a man going to come in and rape me right now? Because this feeling feels like the beginning of every other time that trauma happened to me. So they may prefer to sit in the wooden chair and feel safer sitting in the wooden chair.
Yeah.
So that's one example. Or let's say you're going to go meet up with a survivor, like, hey, let's meet at McDonald's, you know, or let's go meet at a Starbucks. And you don't give choice. Well, what if the Starbucks logo is what they saw out of the window of that hotel every day when they were being exploited? There's no way that you know all of the triggers someone's been through. So give options so that the person feels safer by, okay, I feel better sitting here, or I feel better going here. And they can be the one to pick what feels most comfortable to them.
And it also builds, it builds that muscle to be able to use their voice again, where their voice has not been something they've been allowed to share.
Yeah.
And so as a program, that's something we start immediately, is helping them advocate and even learn what they want, because they've been told what they want. They don't even know what they want. They're like, I don't know. And then the other part of that is, you know, understanding that when that happens, when they become triggered, that logical brain literally unplugs. It'd be like unplugging a light, right? The light's not going to work if you unplug it from the wall. And that's what happens when they enter into that fight or flight, is that logical prefrontal cortex here unplugs, which is your decision making, right? So you got to keep the options at the same time, like, kind of simple.
Well, I think it's interesting too, because I think obviously we're a religious organization, so I don't think anybody doesn't know that if they're listening to this or understands where we're coming from. But I find it interesting because you're even saying, and this is kind of the philosophy that you have in the organization, the program is, and I found it interesting that you said this, because you love Jesus, you love him, but you say, it can be harmful to force Jesus on a victim that is not ready to explore faith. Yeah. For the individual, it can feel like you're trying to judge, manipulate, or control them. So how important is it to show them love and show them the love of Jesus and not force it on them, and just love them and be with them and wait until they're ready? Like, how important is that?
I mean, that's the continuation of trauma-informed care into faith-based settings, right? So choice still applies there.
Yep.
They still have a free will to choose if they want to experience more of Jesus or if they're not ready for it. So when well-meaning Christians force faith on someone that's been victimized or controlled and forced into many other things, and they don't feel like they have a choice, that can be really challenging and maybe triggering. Another side of things, when we go back to talking about satanic ritual abuse, is that occult members will intentionally do something called false Jesus programming, where they bring in something spiritually or even in the natural that appears like a Jesus that then rapes, harms, or tortures them.
Yeah.
So their understanding of Jesus, and even in the Bible, Paul said, if anybody comes to you preaching some other Jesus, and it's not the Jesus that we preach to you, basically, like, don't listen. So even in the Bible times, there were false Jesuses being preached or being presented. And that's still happening today. Yeah. So for a survivor of sex trafficking that's also experienced satanic ritual abuse, if the Bible and faith is forced on them and they don't have a choice, that could actually be very triggering for them, because their understanding of Jesus is the one that raped them and tortured them. So they have to be reintroduced to who the true Jesus is. And for some survivors of SRA, they prefer, it's easier to even hear the name Yeshua, which is the Hebrew name of Jesus, because false Jesus programming uses Jesus versus the name that he lived by and was known by during when he was walking around.
Well, and I think it's also interesting to me with the programming, I've heard of stories of people dressing up like law enforcement officers.
100%.
And
or
so now
law enforcement officers that are actually officers.
Right. So let's just keep it real. But then there's no trust there. And I think that's another thing that was interesting, is a lot of people will be like, well, why is there not a ton of sex trafficking cases going on in your city when, for instance, like you've helped 85 women this year, right? But why is there not 85 human trafficking cases going all the way through prosecution and all this stuff? And the reality is victims might not trust the police officers to talk to them. And yeah, I think you do a great job of explaining, like, law enforcement task force members need to be mindful that human trafficking investigations are mostly purposely victim-centered because the victim supplies the most critical evidence, personal testimony if there's a trial. However, victims must be stabilized both mentally and physically and must feel safe before investigators can begin in-depth interviews, because that's one of the biggest things we find is the police officers, they're trained to get the bad guy. So they just want to get the information out of this person, get all the intel, and this person's going to do, I don't even know if I trust you. I don't even know if I trust the organization that I'm going to. Like,
right, and we're not even bringing parts into this.
Right. And so
you want to make this really difficult.
They're not going to the police officers, and it's important to have organizations that they can trust so that when they feel safe, then they might come forward later and have these conversations. I mean, you're having situations that happened 20-some years ago, and
justice is still pending.
You're still like processing if or when or how, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So this isn't like, how do we just force this on you right when you're coming out of it? And I think that's something that's big for the law enforcement community to understand, is that you can't just immediately get that. But that's what, it's almost like that's what the hospitals in I say LE, sorry. That's the
law enforcement,
biker word for law enforcement. Is just LE. So, but that's what they're almost trained to do, is try and get all that evidence. And then it can be kind of challenging for them when they want to get these guys so bad, but they can't.
Which is why we're training them in trauma-informed care, in understanding, working with survivors, and really understanding trauma. I love that they brought us in as an organization this year to train on trauma and to train on how that's going to impact their investigations and their interviews. And why things, and how to spot it in situations where they think that it might not even be, because their biases are creating and just being like, oh, it's just another drug house.
Yeah.
Right? But I do want to go back to the Jesus piece and that forced faith, and just remind that Jesus himself did not force himself on anyone. So if our job and mandate is to be Jesus to these survivors, then we're not forcing him on them.
Well, isn't
right? Like, he doesn't even do that. So why should we?
Not even in human trafficking, but just in real life, that doesn't work for anybody.
Right. It doesn't even, he doesn't even do it. Because it's got to be a decision that they make, that they want out of their heart. Like, how would we be any different if we're forcing something on them that they don't want?
Right.
Like, that doesn't work. And then, is that really even a true heart and life conversion? If it's coming out of a place of like, well, if I don't do this, I'm going to lose my safety, this bed, and food.
Right.
Right? And so it's like, and I'll tell my staff, you all are free to be you. Like, we are upfront and honest with who we are as an organization. But if someone has said, I don't want prayer, I don't want that, then we're done. We're done. Until they come back to us and say, actually, I do. Then we're done. And we honor that, because that's been the request made.
And the consistency of demonstrating what true love really is, like, our lives can be living epistles before men, like living books. Like, people are reading us, and they can either say, okay, they always got a bad attitude, I don't want anything that they're talking about with Jesus. Or if there's love and like peace and joy oozing, it's like something is attractive about that to people that have experienced trauma, where if it's true and sincere, life lived, then people will say, I want what you have. Like, how do I have that? Is it possible for me to be happy every day and not have nightmares every night? Like, is that actually possible for me? Yeah.
This is really good. I'm thinking about, as we're kind of going through this, the last thing, I got one last question, but before then, we get asked this probably more than any, why don't they just leave? Do you want to, could I get from both of you, like, why don't you just leave? Could you explain a little bit what, like, Stockholm Syndrome, trauma bonding, that type of thing is? Because that's a question we're constantly asked, like, why
Yeah.
don't they just leave?
Yeah. Well, the first thing is there a choice where you actually can, the complex trauma bonding is, I mean, these traffickers and pimps are masters in psychology and manipulating the mind. And so most survivors don't feel like they can leave. There's all of the lies and the threats of, if you do leave, this is what's going to happen to you. Or I'll just go get your sister and do the same to them, right? So even though a victim may be coming and going out in public, they may be going to school every day. Like, why didn't they just tell somebody at school? Why don't they just leave? Why don't they just run? Why don't they just, because it's not just the physical confinement of not being able to leave a room and being locked in somewhere, but there's emotional and spiritual bondage that's happening, as well. There's a mental bondage that's happening as well. With complex trauma bonding, it's like it sways back and forth between love bombing or this is why you need me, filling voids in certain ways that the victim has, like we talked about in the grooming process up front, and then it switches over to trauma and abuse, and well, you have to do this, and it can sway back and forth, and it gets so complex to where you feel like that's the only person you can be. You don't think that you can leave. You don't think that anybody would believe you. You've been told, but pimp trafficker culture is like, if you try and snitch, the law enforcement's going to arrest you anyways. You're going to jail. They're not going to believe you anyways. So you really don't think that that's even a choice to leave. So someone that's never been through any trauma would be like, oh, it's simple. Why don't you just run? It's not simple.
Yeah.
It's very complex.
And then there's always the promise when you're over here in the trauma space, there's always the promise that they're giving that it's going to actually land over here and stay here at some point in time.
Yeah.
Right? Like we're eventually going to get here and this will be life forever. So just hold out until we do that. Like that's what they do in the midst. That's why they love bomb, why they do all those things, is so that when they're over here and operating in this space, they can go, well, we're going to get here. Like this won't be forever. This isn't how this goes all the time.
Yeah. I would say look up narcissistic abuse. Anybody watching? If you understand narcissistic abuse, you'll understand why don't they leave. Because pimps and traffickers are narcissists.
Yeah. And I think that other piece that is really vital, and I can't remember where I heard this, but it was the difference between choice and decision. Like making a decision to stay is not choosing to stay. And I know that like people might, what do you mean? Okay, well, if someone says, do you want to stay or do you want to leave? That's a choice, right? That's where you get to go, oh, actually, I think I'm going to leave. But when they say, well, you can stay or I'm going to go get your sister. Now she's making the decision that to avoid
I'm saving my family.
Right, in her world, a bigger evil. Like she's making the decision that she has to stay because she can't leave. Does that make sense? So it's like, it's understanding that it's not like they have this choice that they feel in front of them of like, oh, I could leave.
Yeah. And also with the Stockholm Syndrome thing, which is a little different than complex trauma bonding, it's like, this is where someone can actually be in love with their captor. They can be completely in love with them because it's like the lesser evil. It's like, oh, like, especially for child trafficking victims, like they think mom and dad love me. I love my mom and dad. I don't want to say anything bad about them. I don't want to leave them. I love my mom and dad. For the intimate partner trafficking, well, he loves me. We're just doing this because this is what we got to do to survive. Like I'm in love with him. But the Stockholm Syndrome is more so like you are actually captive somewhere and you form emotional connection with someone with one of your captors because it's just like something that happens. Like my situation when I was sold overseas, I actually had Stockholm Syndrome with the girlfriend that I was purchased as a Christmas gift for because she was pretty. She was nice. She was like, she didn't do the disgusting, nasty stuff that he did. And I thought, well, maybe she does care about me. She's helping prevent me from doing the nasty stuff because she liked that stuff. So she would do it with him. So she's saving me, right? She's saving me from doing the stuff that was more horrible. So I actually started forming affection for her.
Because it's a human need.
I was stuck there. So like that was like Stockholm syndrome versus the complex trauma bonding that I explained earlier.
And the reality is God created us that's a human need. Like we need to feel connection, acceptance, and love. And so our minds are going to create that in any way that we can within any circumstance to survive it.
Right.
And that's what happens.
I think as we get kind of ready to wrap up, I wanted you to share something for us because as you guys get into this, and I want to explain this. This book that I'm looking at and reading is called Faith-Based: Inside the Minds of Sex Trafficking Victims. It's actually a training manual for Christian counselors, safe homes, nonprofits, churches, faith-based service providers. As you get more into the book, if you're wanting to learn more about the difference between parts and deliverance, and you're interested in that, it goes through a lot of that. And I think I would encourage you to read it and look into it. But biblically speaking, there's a verse that the Lord has really opened up for you. And this is a verse that we actually rock on our motorcycle cuts. And it's Isaiah 61:1. And I think I used to just read through, the Spirit of the Lord has anointed me to preach good news to the poor, and kind of skip the next part a little bit. And then I would go to set captives free. And I don't have the ability to ever do that again because of you. But could you explain what Isaiah 61 really means, and how it is possible for someone biblically with multiple personality disorder to be healed?
Yeah, so there's biblical context to all the wild, crazy stuff we've been talking about today. There's verses for everything. Okay, so as crazy as it sounds, read your Bible, y'all. It's true. But yeah, so Isaiah 61, which is amazing that God gave that to you as the foundational verse for the ministry, because you probably had no idea that it would be getting wild. But
I
was down with like preaching good news to the poor.
Let's do it.
Like, that's
Anya's over here being like, I'm gonna grab this one.
Let's do this part. So when it says heals, he heals the brokenhearted. That word brokenhearted, when you go back to the Hebrew of the Old Testament, it is the word shabar, and that means shattered, fractured, split into pieces. And so when Jesus comes to heal the brokenhearted, it's not just like, oh, my girlfriend broke up with me. I'm so brokenhearted. She left me. Oh, Jesus can heal your broken heart, son. No, it means like your soul was shattered, like glass that dropped. Your soul was shattered, or like puzzle pieces that have been scattered. And he can bring your soul, your fractured personalities, parts, alters, identities. Your soul was shattered from trauma and compartmentalized. Jesus can heal your shattered, broken heart, your broken, shattered soul. So it's right there in the word that, yes, good news to the afflicted. Heal the broken, shattered soul that's been split and fragmented into parts. Set the captives free in the natural, like the work that you guys do, but also in the spirit realm, if there's any places that they are captive and enslaved to demons, okay? And then opens up the prisons for them that are bound. That could be in the natural, but again, it could also be in the spirit realm or in the soul realm, where someone is imprisoned, compartmentalized, and stuck in places where they can't move forward in their life. Jesus can open up those stuck places, those prisons where they've been bound. So that, like, basically Jesus explains all of the dimensions that he can bring healing and freedom in someone's life in that verse, which is why he then reads it about himself when he's introducing his ministry.
Yeah, that was like the first thing he announces of who he is.
Here I am.
What, final question, and then I want to allow you to do some shameless plugs.
No shame here, guys.
This one will be, you guys can both jump on this, but it's going to be to Anya, and then I'd love to hear your thoughts. What is it like for a person coming out of human trafficking to end up at helping captives? What does that look like? What is that experience like? What does the intake process look like? What does that look like, and specifically for somebody coming out of satanic ritual abuse?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's a lot of transition and a lot of change really quick, which can be hard. And so we always try and honor that and understand that, because it's our everyday and we're used to the program, we're used to the house. So I'm always encouraging staff to just remember what it's like to be in their shoes, to come in and not know anyone, not know the house, not know the rules, have everything in their life change, everything. And so we are always trying to come with a heart of love and compassion to each one of the survivors that we work for. We also probably over-communicate, or at least that's our goal, is to over-communicate with understanding of what our program is for that choice piece. So when they come in, they will arrive at our offices, is where we have them initially come in. Because of safety issues and factors, we go ahead and scan all their items for trackers. If they're coming out of SRA, we will even scan them, obviously fully dressed, but we scan them. And then we will do the standards of just running pregnancy tests, drug tests, alcohol tests, all those things. Not because that's something that's a limitation to our services, only for safety of knowing, because if they have been using like something like fentanyl or alcohol, or maybe don't even know that fentanyl's been in their meth that they've been using, their detox is going to look different, and that's not something we can handle at the house. We need to get them medically cleared. And so if they pop anything that is needed for medical detox, we go straight to the ER. And we get them cleared, we get them on whatever they need to, however the doctors and her decide is the best way to move forward. And that can look multiple ways. Sometimes doctors are like, hey, she's actually really stable, here's some meds, take her home, keep an eye on her. And they've trusted us with that process because we've done that so many times now. And then sometimes if there's a bit more instability physically, they're going to go ahead and say she needs to go into detox and stay in a medical facility to do that. So we trust them with that answer. Then we will take them to the house, and we're giving them a tour. We're making sure that their phones are in Faraday bags, all of those things. Those are kind of the basics that we're running through. And then we're getting them settled in their room, getting any of their basic needs met. But really what we want is we just want to stabilize them. So depending, every survivor is different based off of what they're coming in with. And so we really try to be led by what that survivor needs. What are their needs specifically, and what is their stabilization? So we have aspects that we kind of keep track of on a weekly basis of what that stability looks like. Because what is stability? Stability is like, I'm sleeping, I'm eating, my body is functioning in elimination properly. I'm drinking, right? I'm hydrated. What are my detox symptoms that I'm currently experiencing? Are they getting better? All of those things are what we're assessing for on a stability piece. And then we're also looking at that mental health piece of giving some assessments that see where their trauma symptoms are, where their depression and anxiety symptoms are, and we're tracking that as well during their stay every couple of weeks. We redo those to see where they're at. And really, we just want to be seeing that they are feeling more stable. We also work on a sense of felt safety, which is really important when working with survivors, because we can sit there and go, well, you're safe. What's the problem? Well, yeah, they mentally know they're safe. Like they can look around and be like, yeah, I'm good. There's no trafficker here. But we want them to feel safe. And that takes a lot longer. We don't expect that upon them walking in the door. And that takes us building rapport, building trust, and helping meet them where they're at. And that's different for all of them. So some we may have to meet them at a bit lower and set our expectations lower. And there is no shame in that. It's just, we don't know when their trauma started. And if trauma started at 9 years old, then there's going to be a stunted emotional piece in that. Based off of when that trauma started, right? And so we may have to meet them and set that bar a little bit lower then and to kind of judge where they're at, because we want them to feel successful. So if we're setting the bar way up here and they're down here, they're not going to feel successful in their stay with us. So we want to be able to set the bar right here to where we're always like calling them up just a little bit, but we're also helping them achieve that. So they can feel successful and grow and stabilize and their time with us. And then we're just giving them choice. We're giving them choice of where do what do you need? How are you going to feel safe? Do you need to get out of here? We don't work on long-term housing locally. So usually upon someone coming in, it's because they want to get out and they want to get into long-term programming. And so that's our goal and our focus. But again, that looks different. We have a game plan, but we hold our game plan very loosely based off of what that particular survivor needs and what their desires and their wants are. We have some come in that are like, we're ready to go. We want this, we want this, we want this, and they want like the full gamut of all services that are offered. And we're like, okay, you want to run, we will run with you. And if you want to crawl, we'll let you do that too. And we're okay with both. And so we just really want to meet them with right where they're at and give them the choices that they may not even know that they have available to them, but foster and help them, empower them to find their voice again.
That's awesome.
And I saw the safe home too, by the way.
I was going to say, you've been here.
It's so beautiful.
What would you, I'm going to give you the last thing.
Yeah.
What has your experience been like? What would be your final thoughts?
Absolutely.
Whatever you want to share with our audience, and then where can they find you and your books?
Sure. Well, I appreciate the commitment to excellence in the safe home, by the way. I've seen a lot of safe homes in the nation, and it's so beautiful. It's so nice. It's modern. It's clean. All the stuff that's needed is there. So I just want to honor you guys and how you've established and built your safe home. It's really beautiful. But I also want to just acknowledge the fact that with all of those basic needs and all of the services that you offer, you also, for the person like me that has the story like me, you have the ability to help people like me.
Yeah.
You have the ability to help with integrating fractured parts, help with deprogramming mind control and ritual abuse.
Yeah.
And for those that are struggling with stuff in the spirit realm and not able to sleep because they have experiences like I've shared earlier.
Yeah.
You guys, your staff is actually trained and equipped to help with that stuff too, which again,
and have done
is
that.
rare.
Yeah, we've done that.
And done it well.
We practice that, and we've done that very successfully.
Yeah.
And yet also always provided choice.
Yes.
So even though we have ability, we don't force that.
Yeah.
Because we've also had survivors come in that are victims of SRA and they weren't ready for those services.
Yeah.
And we were so okay with that. It was just like, if that changes, we're able.
Yeah.
And you just let us know. And then we would just leave it at that. And that was it. That would be like end of conversation. And unless they came to us and said, okay, no, now I'm feeling ready. And a lot of times it's just like, let's have another conversation. We'd have another conversation.
Yeah. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's actually a place in the United States that knows how to help people like me. And that, again, like I said earlier, I wish I had a helping captives when I was younger. So I'm so glad that you guys are here and honor all that you guys do. And the shameless plug section, just to wrap things up, if anybody's interested in any of my books or want to reach out, they can just go to my website, SulaLael.com, SulaLael.com, and everything's there to connect.
Highly recommend.
Thank you so much. It's been an honor, and I look forward to seeing what God's going to be doing the next upcoming season.
It's going to be good.
All right. Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll see you next time.